it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. A man, fed up of his life, walks out at night to end it, but instead ends up in a secret place where everyone needs to wear a mask to enter. Chapter 1. Not allowed to be normal. So, got any plans for tonight? Asked Charlie. Nah, just the usual. Falling asleep on the couch in front of the TV, Stanley replied in a tired voice. Oh, come on, said Charlie, picking up a king and placing it on an empty slot. He was playing solitaire on his computer instead of working. It's Friday night and Halloween's coming. I think it's got to be twice as crazy out there tonight. Look, it's Crime City, Charlie. Every night here's Halloween night, and crazy is your kind of thing. I'm good at normal, Stanley said without looking at Charlie, who was sitting on his right. He was instead focused on the report he had to submit before the end of the day. Exactly. This is Crime City. No one's allowed to be normal here. This is against the city spirit, Charlie said funnily. And that was the problem with being normal in Crime City. Nobody expected that of you. Everyone just believed that everyone's a criminal, small or big. Everyone just assumed that about everybody else. Stanley, the poor guy, who came into this city for a promising life, without any financial trouble, which he eventually got, but at what cost? He was innocent and was not suited for the life in a city like this. Many of his fellow employees desperately hoped for him to be a secret spy or something, but, well, Stanley was just Stanley, the boring guy he'd always been. By the way, if you like being normal, maybe you can dress up as the assassin on Halloween. Wait, now that I think of that, well, that's not normal either. Yeah, I was going to say that. Yes, the assassin, Stanley thought. How can he ever be like him? It was the most amazing thing that had happened since they'd come to the city. A few months ago, a hooded man started attacking the drugs and weapons deals that went on at night. He got famous as the mafia killer. Stanley saw him on television and was so happy that there was finally someone who was fighting crime. But after about a week, he died trying to kill a drug lord. He did take him with him, though. They both fell off a cliff in a car into the sea. He was never seen again, so he was assumed dead. But Stanley hoped in his heart that he'd survived, somehow, anyhow. Now, how can he, or Charlie, compare him to that great assassin? Stanley looked at Charlie, who was enjoying his own little joke he'd just cracked. He didn't try and persuade Stanley any further, so Stanley got busy in his work. A few hours later, when Stanley was just about to finish, his boss, Pamela, walked in. She was a short woman with dark hair and a mean face, and she had a temper. Everybody in the office was sure that she worked for the underworld. They'd whisper their doubts to each other in the restroom or out of the office because they were so afraid of her that they suspected she might hear them, and the next day they'd be dead. Pamela walked up to Stanley's desk and stood there for a good minute, but didn't say anything. Stanley didn't notice her for the next 2 minutes, but then he looked up and jumped. Oh, hey, Pamela. What's up? God, Stanley, are you blind? She said in her loud voice. I don't have time for this. Have you finished your report? I'm almost done. Just 5 more... Almost, Pamela interrupted. I don't want almost. God, Stanley, are you even capable of this work? How much more time do you need? A monkey could have done it faster than you. Pamela went on to humiliate Stanley for a few minutes more, until she was out of breath. I don't care how much time it takes you to finish this report. You're not going home until you do. And then she marched back into her office. Well, it took Stanley a mere 5 more minutes to finish that report. He printed it out and took it into Pamela's office. She looked at him and said, "Oh, now you're finished. Only if you could do it without me pushing you." Stanley put the file on her desk and left, but not without saying, "Have a nice weekend. See you on Monday." To which Pamela replied, "Yeah, whatever." Stanley got back to his home, changed out of his office clothes and fell on the couch. He switched on the television, but he wasn't really watching. He was thinking about the humiliation he'd received in the office that day, and many more before that. It's just one of the many things that he didn't like. Well, he'd gotten used to everything else, but not being humiliated. Oh, he thought of every single thing Pamela had called him. He remembered every animal she compared him with. And his eyes teared up. What kind of a life was he living, he asked himself. And for what? Money? Oh, can't do this. He can't sell off his respect for money. He decided that he would resign from his job. He'd made up his mind, but the thought laid heavy on him. After dinner, he did something nobody should do in Crime City. Nobody innocent, anyway. Not at night. He walked out of his apartment. He was lost in his thoughts. He was walking on the sidewalk thinking about what he should do after resigning, when he reached what was a darker part of the alley. And then, suddenly, don't try anything smart. Take out everything you got now. Chapter 2. Not living your life. Stanley casually looked to his right. A man appeared out of the shadows holding a knife in his hand. Stanley just ignored him and kept walking. Well, this must have come as a shock to the man, because for a few seconds nothing happened. But then he crossed Stanley, came in front of him, and held his knife to Stanley's throat and said, "You think this is funny? 'Cause it isn't. This is not a Halloween prank. Now, hand over your wallet if you want to live." And he pushed his knife just a little to intimidate Stanley. "Do you want to live?" Oh, that's an intelligent question, Stanley thought. Do I want to live? After all, life hadn't turned out to be exactly what he'd expected. It was interesting that this man was trying to scare Stanley with what would actually be relieving for him. Oh, this poor guy, he doesn't have a clue, he thought, and without any notice burst into laughter. The man's face fell. He was now looking like a kid whose Halloween candy had gotten stolen. This was Crime City. He must have had encounters with the larger fishes of the city, but it was evident that nobody had ever laughed at him. He was about to run, but then Stanley, who was still laughing, had now started crying. He sat on his toes with his hands on his face, and he was sobbing so hard that his whole body was shaking with each sob. What happened next had never happened anywhere in the world, and probably would never happen again. The man sat beside Stanley and asked, "Hey man, you okay?" What? Even Stanley was surprised. "Look, I'm sorry." Stanley wiped his face with his hands. "Just kill me." Whoa, you gotta be the first suicidal man I've met here in Crime City. Come on, man, what's wrong? "I hate my life." Bro, I don't know a lot, but I know this much, that if you hate your life, you're not living it. The man then stood up. "Come on, let's go," he said. "Where?" asked Stanley, looking up at the man. "Just come with me. I'll take you to a secret place. If you don't like it and you still want to die, I'll kill you." Well, Stanley didn't even think twice. He stood up and started walking with this who not only had he just met, but had also tried to mug him. He didn't care about anything anymore. They were both walking silently when the man broke the ice. "Hey, what's your name?" "Stanley." "Oh, so you're not from here. I'm Raghu. Bro, can I ask you what's wrong? Is it about a girl?" "What's wrong? No, you should ask what's right. The answer would be nothing. Oh, I came to this city hoping it'd be better than... Well, I thought I'd be successful here." "You're not? Seriously? So you're also the first man in Crime City who's not successful?" "Oh, what are you, an entrepreneur?" "You kidding? I couldn't be more successful." "How? I mean, who do you even mug? Nobody steps out at night in Crime City, well, except for criminals." "Dude, what world do you live in? That's just what people say. Crime City's not more alive ever than at night. But yeah, I mean, you are right. Only criminals step out at night, but the thing is, everybody in Crime City is a criminal. The guy sells coke just around the corner. He's an accountant in a bank." "What?" "Yeah. If he's an accountant, then why does he do it? You're kidding, right? He makes as much money in one night as his whole month's salary. How do you know that? I'm the security guard in the same bank. Stanley was surprised, and so was Raghu. I mean, you must know that. What you do at night? Raghu asked. Sleeping? Really? That explains a lot. So what were you doing out at night on that sidewalk? I don't know. Nobody spoke for the next few minutes. They both walked silently. Stanley still didn't care to ask where they were going, but the silence felt a little awkward to him. So, how much do you make in one night? Stanley asked. Enough. It's been a good year, well, except for that week a few months back when that hoodie guy started killing people of the Mafia. Where everyone was afraid to go out. You remember that, right? Oh, yeah. It's still the best thing that's happened in Crime City. Well, I was just happy that at least there was someone fighting against the crimes. What the hell are you talking about? Fighting against? Raghu let out a peal of mean laughter. He wasn't fighting the criminals. He was just another fish. A bigger one, he said. No, he wasn't. He was good. Oh, yeah, he was. He was just another thief. He was just running solo. I get it. It was good for him. He didn't need anyone anyway. But he was just another criminal of Crime City. No, you're lying. Dude, what's it to you? I mean, why do you care? I don't know. I just do. You're lying. No, man, I'm not. How do you know that? How are you so sure? Because I saw him. Stanley didn't say anything. He kept walking in the silence. Raghu continued. Yeah, it had to be one of his earliest strikes. Saw him myself kill all those people and then leave him with all their drugs and money. I get it that he meant something to you, but he's not what you think he was. Look, I'm sorry. It's okay. You don't have to be sorry. I just don't believe it. Don't think about it. Let it go. We're here. They both stopped in front of an old abandoned military base. Isn't this the hidden military base they had to leave after Crime City became... Stanley began to ask. Yeah, they couldn't have kept it hidden long enough so close to Crime City, so they left it overnight. But why are we here? You'll see. Raghu walked to the entrance and knocked on the security guard's cabin window. A man opened the door. He was wearing a mask on his face. He looked at Raghu. Mask? He asked. Raghu reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out an old wooden mask. He then put the mask on his face. The man stepped aside. Raghu gestured at Stanley to follow him and entered the base. Stanley followed him, but the masked man blocked his path. Mask? He asked again. Oh, no, he's new, Raghu said. The man stepped aside and pointed at the wall. Stanley entered and looked up at the wall. There were dozens of masks hanging there. Some of them were just simple and plain, like the one Raghu and the man himself wore. Others had shapes of different animals and features carved on them. Pick one, the man said. Stanley took a simple mask and put it on his face. Come along, said Raghu. Stanley followed him into a dark corridor. A faint sound of very loud music struck his ears. There was a large crowd somewhere in this building. They reached the end of the corridor. Raghu pushed the door, and while he did that, he looked at Stanley and said, Now, this is life. Chapter 3. Not afraid of myself. The deafening music almost made Stanley put his hands to his ears. The colourful lights bouncing off the walls and floor and people made his eyes hurt for a few seconds. When Stanley finally adjusted to the lights, he turned his head all around what looked like a hangar. It was crowded with people. All of them were wearing masks. There was some bars set up. A few of them had bartenders, and the rest were open. Everyone Stanley laid his eyes on was drunk up to a point where they couldn't tell the floor and ceiling apart. Stanley saw one guy throwing up a little into his hands and then swallowing it back again. It almost made Stanley throw up before he looked away. "Welcome to the real Crime City," shouted Ragu. "Whose party is this?" asked Stanley, matching up to Ragu's volume, and even then no one else heard him. "It's Crime City's party. Open for everyone. It's the biggest party in this city. Goes on till Sunday morning. But I mean, who organized this? Do you care? Get yourself a drink and get comfortable. You might get lucky tonight. No, let me rephrase that. You will get lucky tonight." And then Ragu disappeared into the crowd. Stanley started to signal him to stop, but he gave up. He was now standing among drunk, dancing people, nervously. He then made his way through people to an ice bucket and picked up a beer. He'd been to parties before with Charlie, who had taken him forcefully. He used to sit in a corner silently drinking his beer when half-drunk Charlie would keep asking him to come dance. It's a good thing Charlie's not here, he thought. He looked around but couldn't find a place to sit, so he just stood there leaning against the wall. When he'd finished his beer, he tried to find a trash can or something else where he could put his empty bottle. He didn't want to just throw it away, not because it was his first time and he was nervous, but because he wouldn't do that anywhere, not even in his own apartment. He didn't want to ask anybody either, so he just stood there with the empty bottle in his hand, looking for a hint. He looked around to find someone with a bottle in their hand so he could see what they would do. Then he spotted one. A man who was wearing a split mask, the lower half of which was dangling below his chin. He must have taken it down to be able to drink. He came closer to Stanley, to the ice bucket, put his empty bottle back in and took a new one. It was then that Stanley noticed there were already some empty bottles in the bucket. He waited for the man to leave and then put his own bottle back and picked up a new one. He did it so casually as if he already knew what to do, but he was still very nervous. After some time, a man came pushing himself through the crowd. He was carrying a carton of beers. He took the empty bottles out and put some new ones in. Stanley finished his second beer and started a third. After some time, when Stanley was on his fifth beer and still wasn't in the mood to dance, he was just looking at people and someone tapped him on his shoulder. He turned back and looked at the woman who wore a ballerina's mask and had a low-ball glass in her hand with a green drink in it. "You're not dancing?" she asked loudly, though nobody heard her except for Stanley. No, I don't dance." Me neither. Are you new?" "How did you know?" "I've been watching you from over there. You didn't move at all. You're only drinking beer, and that's your fifth beer." "Well, yeah, it's my first night." "Yeah, I remember my first night. Changed my life. You'll see it's going to change your life too, but first, the rules. 1. No taking off the mask. 2. No names. And there's a third one, but I'm too drunk to remember it." "Oh, okay, thanks. Hey, do you know who organized this?" "Yeah, but first let's get somewhere where we can talk, and let's get you a real drink. Follow me." Stanley followed her through a different door and a few different dimly lit corridors. A few people crossed them on the way. Stanley couldn't remember where he'd come from. It all looked like a puzzle to him. They entered a different hangar. It looked exactly the same, but there were a few major differences. First, there was no loud music playing. Second, since there was no music, there was no need for colourful lights. It was dimly lit with lamps and incandescent bulbs. Third and last, there was plenty of space to sit. There were countless couches and chairs. There were a few similarities too. People in this room were just as drunk, but they were just sitting and talking, and they all had a mask on their faces too. The woman took Stanley to a bar and said to the bartender, "He's new. Make him a real drink and a refill for me." The bartender nodded and started making the drinks while the woman turned to Stanley. "So, how did you find out about this place?" That's a little crazy. A mugger brought me here. He tried to mug me, but I sort of broke down." "That's not crazy at all. That's actually perfect. Yes, that's the third rule. You find someone who needs to be here, and you bring them here." "Wait, how many parties are going on here?" "Just the one. Why?" Then, is this the same party? Yes, that's the same party, but for a different kind of people. Wait till I get you to see the naked ones. Why do you think we need a goddamned abandoned military base? I don't think anyone's ever been to all of them. So, back to my question. Who organizes these? Do you really care that much? Okay, just in case you do, a bunch of rich party maniacs of Crime City gather here every week and drink their money off. Satisfied now? Stanley didn't have to say anything because their drinks had arrived and he quickly took a sip. It felt like fire and ice was rolling down his throat together. He could feel the toxins dissolving in his blood. He concluded that the same thing happened with the woman because none of them spoke a word for a few minutes. Then Stanley finally broke the silence. Hey, can I ask you something? Why the masks? These are not masks. These are our real faces, she replied mysteriously. What? Yes, the face beneath this mask. That's the real puzzle, the facade. That's the real mask, she began to explain. This mask represents our lives in Crime City. We all wear masks. Nobody knows anybody's real face. We're all masquerading our true selves. So no matter if we're here at this party at night or out there in the city in broad daylight, we're always wearing masks, each and every one of us. Not me, Stanley said without even thinking. Actually, that was one thing he didn't have to think about. I don't wear any masks. I'm not one of these people, and I'm sure there are other people in Crime City who are not afraid either. Afraid? Afraid of what? Themselves. They don't wear masks to hide from others. They do it to hide from themselves. They're afraid that they'd look in the mirror and see someone else, a demon, controlling their bodies and playing with their minds, making them someone they don't want to be. So they put on a face and a fake smile, or, as you said, a mask, to fool not the people but themselves, that they're in control still. I'm not one of those people. When I look into the mirror, I see myself. No matter how much of a failure, how much of a loser, I still see myself. I'm still in control of my body and my mind. I'm not afraid. And as he said that, he slowly started to slide his mask off to prove his point. But the woman grabbed his hand, and in doing that, she pulled herself closer to Stanley. Wow. Every word, every single word you said is true, she said softly. Stanley could hear her breathe on his mask. You somehow saw through all of our masks and faces. You're the most interesting person I've met in my entire life. Then she came even closer, and his lips met hers. It felt like fire touched fire, and more fire erupted. After a minute, she was dragging him through the dark corridors. Everything was just lights, colors, and shapes to Stanley, which was swirling past his eyes. They were probably in the dormitory now, because there were rooms with beds in them, some of whose doors were shut. They still couldn't keep the noise of what was happening behind the doors down. Stanley heard a door shut and felt like he was being pushed onto the bed. And the world was just a cocktail of sweat and saliva, lust and desires, mixed with alcohol and blood for the next few hours or maybe days. Who cared? Good morning, Charlie, Stanley said as soon as he entered the office. Hey, good morning, buddy. How's your weekend? Don't ask me. I still can't remember mine. The same. You know me, he said. But when he started walking towards Pamela's office with his resignation letter in his hand, he started thinking, did I just lie? Did I too put on a mask? He entered Pamela's office, but she wasn't there. He decided to wait outside, so he turned, but bumped into Pamela, who was trying to get in. All the papers she was holding fell onto the floor. Stanley, you idiot! I'm sorry, let me help you. He started picking up the papers along with Pamela. You can't work, you can't walk, you can't even see. Why are you even here? Funny she asked that, he thought. I'm sorry. I have to staple them. I'll get these papers. You get the stapler from the drawer. Okay. Stanley stood up and saw a half of a ballerina tattoo on Pamela's lower back, peeking from under her skirts. He'd seen that tattoo somewhere. He tried to remember, but couldn't put his finger on it. No, it can't be, he thought. I'm just being ridiculous. Maybe I'm still hungover. He walked up to the desk and pulled the drawer. He didn't see the stapler, so he pulled the bottom drawer and saw, along with the stapler, a few crumpled up papers and some old coins, and a ballerina mask. "Come on, quick! Can't you do anything?" "Oh, yes, here." He handed her the stapler and started to walk out. "Wait, what were you doing in my office?" Nothing, just, he said, balling up his resignation letter in his hand behind his back. "Just wanted to say, good morning." He smiled and left Pamela puzzled. I was the most useless person in the world for her, but the moment I put on a mask, I became the most interesting person she'd ever met. Stanley was thinking while walking back to his desk. Well, maybe masks don't hide our true selves. Instead, they reveal something that's hidden deep within. A new face. A new self. And at that moment, Stanley had put on a mask. The woman was right. His first night in that party did change his life. Hi, my name's Brianna, and this is my story. I don't know if anyone will ever actually read this, but, well, I had to try. Besides, it's not like I have anything better to do these days. Perhaps I'll even be able to warn someone and do some good during the course of my pathetic existence, before it's too late. My time's almost up. The clock is ticking. Seconds near running out as the treatments grow more and more intense. Sooner or later, I know that'll be my demise. No one cares, though. Not the doctors, not the orderlies, or the scientists marveling at my condition, treating me as if I was some bizarre mutation of nature, less than a person. And they're all just following my father's orders to cure me by any means necessary, even if a side effect is death. I guess if I die, you'll still think it's better than looking as I do. I used to think that way as well, though, so I understand. It's what I get. Well, no, it's what I deserve. I won't waste your time convincing you that I'm a good person who didn't deserve what happened to me. In truth, I was an awful person, an extremely vapid, self-absorbed teenage boy. I spent my high school days making the lives of my peers as miserable as possible. The few friends within my inner circle, well, I'm certain were only there to lessen the intensity of my cruelty inflicted upon them. I highly doubt any of them will miss me, only noticing my absence in relief. No one has come to visit me, although that doesn't surprise me, honestly. I could make up excuses for my behavior, but that doesn't matter. Plenty of children's mothers abandon them when they're young, but not all of them turn out wretched like me. Besides, I lived a comfortable life of luxury. My father, a CEO of a prominent company, provided me with anything and everything I asked for, in lieu of parental guidance. My nannies, who were also the housekeepers and cooks, were always more concerned with completing their daily tasks than with me, so I was allowed free rein. Perhaps I acted out as a cry for attention, or wanted others to hurt as badly as I felt, or just wanted to mask my own pain. Yes, how cliché. Regardless, my behavior was inexcusable. This lesson was learned far too late, and not just for me. There was one girl in my high school I was particularly relentless to, Shannon. She had large rimmed glasses and frizzy, unkempt hair that was always tied back in a messy bun, resembling a poodle tail, and not a well-maintained one. Although, with some hair product to tame her wild mane, and contacts so her beautiful eyes were on display and her face was revealed, she could have easily been prettier than me, even without makeup that her strict parents wouldn't allow her to wear. Yeah, maybe jealousy is why I was so merciless towards her. She was beautiful in her own way, without any effort, and her parents loved her enough to give her guidelines. Shannon and I were both part of the student council. I was class president due to my highly successful intimidation and "a vote for me is a vote for awesome" campaign, which I thought would make my father proud, but alas, no. This accomplishment was met with the usual hollow, "Oh, that's great, hon," response, uttered from behind the screen of the laptop he was always engrossed with on the rare occasion we managed to have breakfast together. Knowing nothing I could accomplish at school would gain his recognition, I spent my time in student council, planning dances and parties, leaving the harder, less exciting tasks to my vice president, and made things as difficult as possible for Shannon, the class treasurer, who I was exceptionally rude to during our meetings before school. Any time she countered one of my ideas by saying we didn't have the funds, I would blame her for a lack of ability to do her job, rather than accepting the fact that I was constantly exceeding the budget and not terribly helpful at fundraisers. I also seized every opportunity to question and contradict nearly everything she said. During one particular meeting, we were discussing the upcoming Halloween dance. While Shannon was explaining how much money would be available from what we earned at the recent bake sale and car wash, I rolled my eyes to the secretary and vice president beside me and whispered, "Oh, we should donate some of that for conditioner for her wild hair. Or we could save money by unleashing it and throwing spiders in it as a decoration." Oh, we erupted in giggles, barely making any effort to suppress the sound. Shannon froze mid-sentence, disconcertedly looking towards us. She knew the laughter was disrespectfully directed at her. The look of hurt in her eyes will haunt me until I am granted the courtesy of death. Once I finally noticed the silence of her stupefied state, I explained with a cheery smile, still snickering, "Oh, sorry, that was rude of me." There was a long pause where we both stared at each other. Shannon appeared stunned, like a deer in the road caught in the blinding illumination of headlights, and I like a confident queen daring her to challenge me with my gaze and confident demeanor. I could see in her eyes she wanted to say something in her defense, but was unsure of how to proceed. She was too afraid and embarrassed. Her cheeks were overtaken with rosy heat. "No, it was just this thing," I added, hardly feigning an explanation. "It didn't have anything to do with this, though. I was just being rude. Sorry. Please continue." I smiled, clasped my fingers together, and leaned in to sarcastically demonstrate focus. Shannon shuffled her papers around, stammered for a moment before quickly finishing her previous thought, and sat silently staring at an invisible spot in the center of the table through the rest of the meeting. She seemed defeated, and I should have stopped there, but that wasn't enough for my content. I wanted to completely break her. The meeting adjourned and the council filed out into the hallway, where my 3 closest friends, dubbed breeze bitches by the rest of the school, which I may have encouraged, were awaiting my release. "Hey guys, watch this," I excitedly whispered to them and anticipated Shannon's approach. When she was within an arm's reach, I sprang, dropping her pants to her ankles and revealing her full coverage underwear. "I freaking knew it," I shouted, seeking to get as much attention drawn to the situation as possible. "Hey everyone, check out Granny Panties." My posse erupted in laughter on cue. Fellow students passing by chuckled at my prank and carried on. A few had pained expressions of sympathy on their faces, but no one came to her aid. Shannon simply stood there, shocked, mouth agape and completely mortified. Tears welled up in her eyes. Snapping back to reality, she pulled up her yoga pants and ran down the hallway out the door. I stood there triumphant for a moment, like a hunter gloating over a fresh kill. If there was an Olympic event revolving around despicable acts of high school cruelty, I would have just won gold. Shannon was missing for the rest of the school day. Our council meetings convened before school on Fridays, so I assumed she went home to take a break from me for the weekend. I was a little surprised and, to my now shame, impressed with myself. Never before had I pushed her to the point of running home. Even at that time, deep down in the recesses of what remained of my minuscule conscience, beneath seemingly infinite years of an icy cold exterior, I realized I'd gotten to her and maybe pushed things too far. This revelation came to me during lunch, while sitting outside with my posse. I stifled my brief glimmer of humanity and asked the group, Has anyone seen Granny Panties since this morning? Nope. I think Shannon went home, Connor answered without looking up at me between bites of his hamburger. I could tell he was disapproving of the encounter earlier, but knew better than to question me. Still, I hated to be treated with such disdain. For anyone else, silent judgments would be quickly chided, but I'd secretly been crushing on Connor since freshman year, and to an extent I respected his opinion, even if it was irrelevant to my actions. I respected Mandy's opinion as well. We'd been best friends before I became a monstrosity. In her own way, she tried to influence me for the better, but after failing miserably, still stuck by my side. The fourth person in our group was Brandon, Mandy's boyfriend. I could tell he despised me, and I mutually didn't care about him either. But he loved Mandy and had to tolerate me to be with her. He knew to keep his mouth shut about my behavior and could pretend to like me. I, in turn, reciprocated the cordiality. These were the people I surrounded myself with. At least Mandy truly was my friend. Well, upon reflection, maybe she stuck around in hope that I would become the girl I once was, the girl who protected her from middle school bullies until I transformed into one myself. Once, a girl in our class was picking on Mandy in the lunch line, saying she didn't need the calories, calling her fat, and blamed her acne on a poor diet. Mandy wasn't fat. She's never had the body type of a stick figure Barbie like me, but she wasn't overweight. This was right around the time she hit puberty, so in response to all the new hormones ravaging her system, her skin was a little broken out, becoming manageable soon after this instance. However, the girl picking on her was stout, without any signs of curves developing later in life. She resembled a stocky boy, and her face was covered in deep-pitted scars from scratching at chicken pox as a child. When I overheard the horrible things she was saying to my best friend since kindergarten, I burst over in a flash of blind fury. My fist exploded into her face, and she fell back against the floor. I then articulated my anger towards her and opened her eyes to every flaw she possessed. She cowered to me from then on and left Mandy alone. Word spread like a disease through my peers until the school was completely convinced that I was not one to agitate. Mandy had peace, and I was feared. It was my first seductive taste of power, and I was instantly addicted. I never wished to lose my status, and I began to thrive on the misery of others. Almost as if in competition with myself, I was always looking for ways to push things further and further until, well, here I am. Truthfully, I hadn't thought what I'd done to Shannon was that extreme, but you never know what's going on in someone else's mind, or how an action will affect them. After school that day, while my friends and I were leaving, we discussed plans for the weekend. Connor asked, "Hey, you guys checked out the carnival in town yet?" "No, dude, but Brock said it's totally lit," Brandon enthusiastically answered. "Ugh," I loudly sighed, rolling my eyes. "What's wrong?" Mandy asked. "Lit. It's so stupid, and you sound like an idiot when you use it." I scolded Brandon for using a word I abhor so deeply, mostly because I hadn't used it first. "Well, that's what he said," Brandon explained with a shrug as he kicked the ground. There were a few seconds of awkward silence before Connor hesitantly chimed in. "So, you guys want to check out the carnival?" "It's not for, little kids, right?" I asked, realizing my misplaced pessimism as the words slipped off my lips. God, what was I thinking? This was my chance with Connor. It could be like a double date. At some point, we could lose Mandy and Brandon, maybe ride the Ferris wheel together, and I could finally get that first kiss with him. Well, I'm sure there's a few kiddie rides, but I've heard there's some really intense ones too. One's called Vertigo. First, you're strapped into a seat with the vest-like bars that drop over your head, and your legs and arms are free. Then it raises you really high up, higher than all the other rides, and it flips you upside down and drops you all the way back so that you're spinning like somersaulting, stopping just before you hit the ground. Everyone released excited sounds of oohs and whoas. "Ooh, that sounds really awesome. Come on, let's do it," I said ecstatically. "Okay, when are we doing this?" Mandy asked. "How about tonight at 7? We could all meet up there," I suggested eagerly. "Yeah, sure. Okay," was heard amongst the group. Mandy and I parted ways from the boys to go get ready. I wanted to be sure I'd have enough time for preparation to look irresistible to Connor. We met up with the guys 10 minutes past 7 in front of the entrance to the carnival. I told Mandy that I preferred to be fashionably late, but in reality I was nervous, needing a few minutes to collect myself in the bathroom before we left. Such a quality was unbecoming and therefore beneath me. Never would I admit feeling that way to anyone, even to my best friend. I decided on wearing a little black dress that showed just enough skin in all the right places, not wanting to look like I was trying too hard, but still incredibly alluring. Connor looked quite handsome, smiling at me as Mandy and I approached. He'd changed out of his school clothes into nicer, dark-wash faded jeans and a button-up, plaid, long-sleeve shirt. It looked all the more impressive in contrast to Brandon, who was still wearing the same attire he'd worn all day at school and possibly slept in. Oh, he was such a slob. I wondered how Mandy could stand to date him when she could do far better. At least he was thick-skinned enough to handle me. The important thing was that she was happy. Despite my vast narcissism, I wanted the very best and happiness for her. "Let's do this," Connor proclaimed, eagerly rubbing his hands together in anticipation. Mandy took Brandon's hand and the four of us entered the carnival. As we strolled in, we were greeted with an overwhelming array of flashing neon lights and loud carnival music blaring over the sounds of rickety rides running. We paused for a minute, absorbing the atmosphere and weighing our options. "What do you want to do first?" Connor asked with excited, glistening eyes. His boyish charm was one of his more enticing qualities. "Well, first things first, we should probably go get some tickets," Brandon answered. "Oh, yeah," Connor responded. Laughing lightly and nodding in agreement, the four of us lined up at the ticket booth. I bought mine first and waited off to the side for my friends, surveying the sea of possibilities spanning around me. One booth in particular caught my eye. It was called "He Sees You" on the banner, and it was for a caricature artist unlike any other I'd seen previously. The sample art strewn around the walls of the interior of the booth was captivating. Some were abstract angelic or demonic portraits, while others were beautiful representations, and some were outright grotesque. Entranced, it held my gaze until my friends rejoined me. "See something you like?" Connor asked, attempting to follow my line of sight to uncover what I was intently staring at. "Yeah," I said, semi-snapping out of the trance that held me captive. I think I want to get one of those caricatures done. They seem pretty cool." "Well, you can do that, but I want to spend my money on something more worthwhile than a picture of my ugly mug," Brandon laughed, insinuating my conceit. In my hypnotic state, I ignored that apparent insult and agreed. "Okay, I'll catch up with you guys in a bit." The group was taken aback by my response, but acquiesced and left to ride the attractions while I approached the booth. I entered the tent-like structure and studied the artwork hanging around me until a man flamboyantly emerged from behind the curtain in the back. "Hello, my dear," he greeted me. "I am Ronaldo, the seer. I see the unseen and reveal what it is, not what is wished to be." It was clearly a circus act, but I was so captivated I didn't notice the cheesiness of the whole encounter. "I really like your art," I said, flattering the artist. "Would you draw me?" I flashed an innocent smile. "Are you sure?" he asked intently, with a seriousness descending upon his demeanor. "I will draw you as you truly are, and once it's done, the world will see you as I do. The process cannot be undone." He furrowed his brow with a smouldering intensity. I thought he was laying the act on a little thick, but that was the whole fun of the carnival, right? Oh, yes, I'm sure, I cheerfully replied, trying not to laugh at his portrayal. Have a seat, he stated, waving a hand to the metal folding chair in front of a cheap plastic table. I took my place and he sat in the seat across from me, pulling out his supplies from beneath the table. He studied me for a few minutes. His face was solemn and something else I couldn't quite put my finger on at the time, but I've only realized in hindsight. It was ominous, like he was judging me, but not my outward appearance. He was judging my soul, seeing right through me. Ronaldo's burning gaze began to make me feel uncomfortable. I smiled nervously and shifted in my seat. Scanning outside the tent for my friends, I found them laughing and running to get in line for another ride. I didn't think I'd ever seen them so happy and relaxed. Was that my doing? Did I make them tense around me? I wondered this during a brief moment as I watched my friends, when I almost had an epiphany about myself, but then Mandy playfully shoved Connor. Jumping to conclusions, my former selfish mindset resumed. In an instant my curiosity turned to rage. Was Mandy flirting with him? Was one boyfriend not enough for her? That slut. How could she do this to me? She knows how much I like him. God, no one's loyal. Nobody loves me. These thoughts swirled around my head. I looked back to Ronaldo, who was now furiously scribbling on an easel he'd stealthily set up and positioned in a way so I couldn't see the drawing yet. This disappointed me because I desired to watch the process, but he was probably keeping up the mystique. After all, the mystery was the exciting part. It's the reason magicians never reveal their secrets. Once you know how a trick is done, it becomes mundane, trivial. Brandon suddenly burst into the tent, exclaiming, "Boo!" with Mandy and Connor close behind. "Did I throw you off the groove of your picture?" Brandon excitedly asked. "No, dummy, he's a professional," I said in the snobbiest of tones. "How's it coming?" Mandy asked. "Well, I'm sure it's going to be great," I presumptuously answered. Brandon started to make his way around the table to see, and the artist glared at him with penetrating eyes until he backed away, saying, "Okay, I'm sorry, I'll wait," holding up his hands in surrender as if the artist had silently threatened him. Oh, if looks could kill, right? This made me smile, but that smile quickly retreated as Mandy took off her jacket and revealed a pink spaghetti-strapped tank top, which showed off her cleavage that I was so jealous of. "Ew," I said, also remembering how she acted with Connor earlier. "I've told you pink looks awful on you. Besides, God, it's so cliché nowadays. It's like, ooh, girl power." I emphasized those last two words with the classic Valley Girl accent. Mandy shamefully put her jacket back on, staring at the ground. Pausing his work, the artist said, "You should be nicer to your friends. Otherwise you won't have them when you need them." I was outraged by this judgment. Shut up and finish my picture already, or no tip. "You can't buy the things in life that truly matter," he responded, laughing. "And I am done," he added, pulling out a manila envelope and slid my picture inside. "Remember what I told you, and enjoy the carnival." He dismissed me, waving towards the exit with a smug, almost sinister smile. As my friends and I left the tent, we passed Gabby, another girl from our school, with her excited little brother galloping in, dragging her by the arm. She was a large girl, not just overweight, but she was tall and awkward and one of my favorite people to pick on. "Oh, can you draw me riding a dragon?" the boy excitedly asked the artist. "Of course, my dear boy," he warmly answered. During my entire encounter with the artist, he'd never shown me that kind of warmth or kindness. Oh, I thought it was all part of the act. And my sister, can she be riding the dragon too?" "Of course," he answered, studying her. "But I also want to make her own special picture. Would that be okay with you?" Yeah, the boy answered, jumping up and down. He must have been about 5 or 6 years old. Oh, that incredibly excitable age. Well, you're going to need at least 2 pages for this one, anyways, I chimed in as I stormed out of the tent. The last things I heard as I walked away was Gabby loudly sigh, and the artist comforting her by saying, "Don't worry, my dear. I can see how beautiful you are, and I can make." The voice trailed off until I was completely out of earshot. He could draw her however he wished, but it still wouldn't change reality. Following behind my friends through the carnival, I clutched the envelope to my chest, envisioning my portrait. Would it be angelic? The artist didn't seem to like me much, though. Maybe it would be a badass demonic representation of me. Oh, that would be even better. The anticipation was overwhelming me. "Hey guys, wait up!" I yelled over the noise pollution of the carnival. I stopped to slide my picture from the envelope, unveiling a grotesque monstrosity drawn on the page. It was unlike anything I had expected, and scarcely resembled me. The thing's skin was primarily missing. What little remained existed in thin strips stretching over withered muscles. Sparse clumps of greasy hair protruded from the scalp, where the skull wasn't showing. The expression disturbed me the most. It looked like the thing was screaming, agonizingly so. Brandon, Mandy, and Connor encircled me. "Well, come on, let's see it," Brandon requested. Mandy seemingly could tell something was off, and jovially asked, "What's wrong? Does the picture not do you justice?" The guy was a hack. "It doesn't even look like me," I dismissed, starting to slide the picture back into its envelope. Before I'd succeeded in hiding it, Brandon whipped it away from me, saying, "Oh, come on now." Upon seeing the thing, he added, "Whoa, this is pretty cool, honestly. Not what I expect from a caricature, but it's awesome." He passed it around to Connor and Mandy, who both agreed. It was actually cool. I didn't think so. Something about it made me uneasy. Maybe it was because the artist had said it was how he saw me. However, my friends didn't know that, and I thought it best to keep that information to myself. Brandon took one last look before handing the picture back to me, saying, "That's pretty sweet." "Thanks," I responded cheerfully, pretending to be pleased as well. I slid the paper back into its hiding place, and the 4 of us enjoyed the remainder of our night at the carnival. Unnerved by the picture, I never made a move on Connor, but I figured there would be other opportunities in the future. The next morning, I woke up and brushed my hair. I noticed my brush wasn't working very well, as it had filled up with strands I'd shed over the past week, which was odd, since I only need to empty it every other month, but, well, I shrugged it off. The rest of the weekend went by without anything terribly noteworthy happening. I laid in my yard, listening to music and tanning. I met up with Mandy at the mall and did the typical teenager thing. Monday morning came around, and I rolled out of bed to get ready for school. While brushing my long dark hair, I noticed my brush was full again. Already? I wondered, suspiciously eyeing the brush. I ran my fingers through my mane and realized it felt thinner than usual. God, I'm going to have to switch back to the thickening conditioner again, I thought, sighing. I used a thickening agent for a while to gain more volume in my hair, but I'd switched to one with a more pleasant aroma. I assumed this change was the cause for the thinning out that I was now experiencing. Next on the agenda of the morning routine was applying makeup. Upon looking at myself in the mirror, I beheld little red blotches across my face. For a moment, I gasped in shock, completely horrified. "What the—" I began to panic. I must have gotten too much sun over the weekend, I rationalized, examining the rest of my body. The blotches were on my arms, chest, and stomach too. I felt completely appalled. Grasping at straws for any explanation, I reasoned that, well, my sunscreen must be expired. I just got too much sun in certain spots because of it. This excuse satisfied me, and I calmed down as I used a thick layer of cover-up over my face and chest. I put on a thin, long-sleeve shirt to hide the rest and headed for school. Strolling down the halls with my head held high, I adorned my usual air of superiority. I was still thrown off by my own securities from the morning I'd had so far, and no insults came to mind. As I passed by, my fellow students seemed to be whispering and casting odd glares my way. I pulled stringy strands of hair over my chest uncomfortably. Was it my skin? Could they see the blotchiness? I thought I covered it well enough, but apparently not. This behavior continued all the way to my locker. I quickly opened it and hid behind the door, trying to compose myself. Oh, I should have just stayed at home, I thought, deeply regretting showing my face in public. "Hey, you!" came Mandy's voice. I pulled away from the locker and flashed a smile. "Hey!" "How are you doing?" Mandy asked. Her voice was tinged with worry. I'm great," I quickly span out. "Yeah? Did you—" I interrupted her question. "Look, I just got a little too much sun and my sunscreen had expired. No biggie, I'll be fine in a couple of days." Mandy's face twisted with a confused expression. "Okay, but did you hear? Everybody's been talking." I cut her off again. "I don't care what anyone says. It's fine." "Okay," she said, drawing out the word apprehensively. "We should get to class." I ended the conversation, slammed my locker, and left her puzzled in the hallway. I couldn't believe everyone was gossiping about me. I sat through my classes in a despondent state until lunch. My friends and I sat around our table, and I picked at my unappetizing meal. I was unable to focus on the chatter of my friends. Every inch of my skin itched incessantly. Sunburns usually itch like hell. I reminded myself not to scratch and scar myself, and I ran my fingers through my hair, forcing it away from my face. I looked down at the handful of strands and quietly flicked them onto the floor before anyone could notice. "Oh my God, Bea, your face," Mandy said, shocked. "It's fine, I told you. I just got too much sun," I dismissed. "No, you're bleeding," she harrowingly said. "Yeah, God, that looks bad," Connor added. "What?" I asked, confused, feeling a warm drip slide down my cheek. Oh, shit, I must have scratched my sunburn reflexively, I assumed as I stood and ran to the bathroom with my hand covering the side of my face. Looking into the dingy mirror, I discovered a sizable gash through my right cheek. Blood streamed down my face in crimson droplets. Panicking, I grabbed a paper towel from the dispenser and held it tight to stop the bleeding. This cannot be happening. I reached to replace the paper towel, and my sleeve slid up, revealing my raw forearm. God, what the actual... The bathroom door swung open, and Gabby shyly walked in. She shot me an uncomfortably nervous smile and passed by to enter a stall. Her clothes seemed baggier than usual, practically falling off her. Either she was wearing larger clothes or she'd lost weight. I would have paid more mind to this if I hadn't been so absorbed in my own problems at the moment. She finished up in the stall and came to use the sink beside me. Seeing her face in the mirror, I noticed her skin looked clearer. Her acne was receding. She looked up and made eye contact, and I quickly turned my face away. "Are you okay?" she asked with genuine concern. This caught me off guard. I'd never once shown her any kindness. Why would she care about me? "Yeah, I just scratched myself harder than I thought. Time for a manicure." We both laughed, and I added, "You're looking good. You doing something different?" "Not really," she shrugged, smiling. "I've lost quite a few pounds, and my skin started clearing up over the weekend. I guess I grew out of it, like my mum said I would." I nodded, unsure how to respond. "Well, have fun with the manicure," she said, before leaving me alone in the bathroom. Cautiously, I removed the bloody paper towel. The gash seemed to have grown, revealing the muscle behind the skin. I ran my fingers through my hair again, and as I expected, I held a clump of it. Fuming, my thoughts spiraled. What kind of backwards world was this where I was falling apart and Gabby was looking better by the minute? And then I remembered the artist at the carnival. Had he somehow cursed me? No, that's crazy. That doesn't really happen, does it? The saying goes that all legends are based on truth. Maybe he cursed me and blessed Gabby. What was it he said? He sees the unseen and reveals what you really are. Is this what he saw in me? A monstrosity? In my picture, the thing had barely any hair or skin. Was I going to become that? The thought made me shudder. I looked down at my forearm and saw the skin was splitting apart. Panic gripped me. There has to be a way to stop this. If I can just talk to Ronaldo, maybe I can convince him that I've learned my lesson and he can reverse this. I resolved to find him immediately. There literally wasn't a second to waste. I left school without saying a word to anyone and headed back to the carnival. Surely there would be hell to pay when I returned for ditching school like that, but I couldn't care less about that at the moment. There was no way I could explain why I had to leave, anyways. I was cursed and have to go back to the carnival to get it undone. Well, that wouldn't work. I might even be locked up for a psychological break. I'd have to deal with the consequences later. As I approached the side of the carnival, I could see it was currently packing up to move on to another town. Surrounded by collapse rides and tents, everything looked different. I didn't see Ronaldo's booth anywhere. A worker passed me by, with his arms full of ropes and rigging equipment. I stopped him, asking, "Excuse me, sir, where can I find Ronaldo?" The man smirked and turned to walk away. I grabbed his arm and begged, please, tell me." He pointed in the direction of a semi-truck and silently walked away. I ran towards the truck, calling out desperately, "Ronaldo! Ronaldo!" He emerged from behind the truck smiling. "Hello, my dear. How are you?" he asked as if we were old friends. Collapsing at his feet, I struggled to catch my breath as I pitifully asked, "Did you do this to me?" His wicked smile expanded. No, my dear," he began mockingly. "You did it to yourself. I warned you that you would become as you truly are." He paused for dramatic effect and continued. "From the first moment I saw you, I knew what you were. Now the world can see it too." That sinister smile was plastered across his face. "But—" I tried to argue with tears welling up in my forlorn eyes. "No," he sternly reprimanded, as if I were a disobedient dog. "How many people have you treated badly, behaved like a monster to? You have corrupted your soul. Now your appearance is appropriate. Isn't there any way I can fix this? Please, sir, I'll do anything." He pondered for a moment, stroking his beard before answering me. "If you can be genuinely kind to others, do enough good to atone for all the harm you have inflicted, then perhaps I could draw a new portrait. With how adulterated your soul is, though." His voice trailed off, and he shrugged to convey his disbelief and disinterest. "I can do it. I'll do anything. I've learned my lesson, I promise," I sincerely reassured, though I could tell from his expression that he wasn't convinced. "How do I find you again when I'm ready?" He pulled a business card from his sleeve and flicked it to me. "Good luck, my dear, and goodbye." And at that he took his leave and vanished behind the semi. I strolled away from the site of the carnival shambles, brainstorming good deeds I could do. I could volunteer at a retirement home, or the soup kitchen, or... My thought was interrupted by my cell phone ringing. I pulled it from my pocket and saw the caller ID. It was Mandy, probably wondering why I'd disappeared from school. "Hey," I answered. "Are you okay? Hey." Mandy's voice was full of concern. "Yeah. Look, it seems like you're taking Shannon's death really hard, but there's no way you could have known." "Wait. What? Shannon's dead?" I was completely taken aback by this news. "Yeah, it's all anyone's been talking about all day." "How?" Mandy was silent. "Mandy? She..." I could tell Mandy was searching for the right words to say. Choking back tears, she finally explained. "It happened last Friday, after she left school. By the time her parents got home, it was too late." She paused to clear her throat. I was in total shock. Mandy continued. "Everyone says it was because of the bullying, but there's no way you could have known that she would do something like that. High school's rough. Just don't blame yourself." I didn't deserve her sympathetic tone. My arm fell limply to my side, and the phone slipped through my fingers to the ground. I froze, catatonic. I killed her. Maybe not deliberately, but it was my fault entirely. There was no amount of volunteering and good deeds in the world I could possibly do to make up for that. Even if I solved world hunger, I could never bring her back from the grave. I hadn't even known I'd done such a terrible thing, but Ronaldo knew. He could see it, and he punished me for it, deservedly. I shut myself up in my room for as long as I could, slowly, painfully dwindling away. When my dad finally broke down my bedroom door, he was horrified by what he saw, and rightly so. I still remember his shocked gasp as he covered his mouth and said, "My God, Brianna, you need help." Most of my hair was gone, along with a good portion of my skin, and I could feel my muscles atrophying, withering away. First, there were the doctors thinking I had an aggressive form of leprosy. Next, there were the specialists, dermatologists, taking samples fruitlessly. Then, finally, I ended up here, in a special research facility, patient zero of a new plague that seems to have only infected me. I know what's wrong with me, even if no one believes me, and I know I'll die here. The only good I can do is be friendly to the nurses, doctors, and scientists, and to write this. Maybe I can save you from the same grisly fate. I won't tell you to avoid Ronaldo the Seer. In fact, I changed his name and certain elements about him in this story. Nor should you avoid caricatures, for that is not his true profession. Perhaps he doesn't even work for carnivals. My advice is simply to be kind. Be good to your fellow humans, and be good to your soul. Nurture it. Shape it into something you're not afraid to see. Don't be a monstrosity like me.
I never wanted children, not even a little. I never batted an eyelash at the thought, even when I was in my 20s and saw all my closest friends were popping them out one after another. I don't recall a Sunday the year I was 27 when I wasn't attending a friend's baby shower. Even when Edward and I married, neither of us cared much for the idea. We enjoyed our lives together, and he was in the military, so he was away a lot. The hours and days we spent together were precious, and at the time I couldn't even fathom spending time changing diapers or cleaning up after another in that capacity. I'd often watch my friends with their babies and think how lucky I was that I didn't have to worry about any of that. No babysitters required was the lifestyle I lived, and I enjoyed it. Edward felt the same way. And because, well, he was away for months on end, his most recent stint being in Afghanistan. It was hard being away from him, and adding the stress of children on top of all that was more than I could handle. Then, it happened. The phone call every military wife dreads. Edward was riding in a truck with 2 other men when they hit a tripwire, and the vehicle he was in exploded, blowing he and his comrades to bits. There wasn't even enough of him for a funeral. It's funny how one moment we're alive, and then we're just pieces of flesh strung about like feathers in the wind. It gets you thinking about how precious life really is, and how short. After he died, I went through a long grieving process. I had to take leave from my job in sales to learn how to live my life without him forever. When he was stationed somewhere, it was easy because I always knew he'd be back, but knowing he would never return was sharp, like a knife in your heart. A few years passed, and I began dating again, but it was never fun for me. I subconsciously compared every man to Edward. It wasn't on purpose by any means. It was just that they were all too tall, too thin, too stupid, too un-Edward. I took a break from dating, and 3 years after my Edward died, I woke up in a panic at 3 a.m. in the morning. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, looking at myself. I still had the dark hair and hazel eyes that had drawn Edward to me in the first place. "You have an aura of mystery, and it was hard to escape you," he once said to me. I looked at the pale ghost in front of the mirror and wondered where the pretty girl from that tiny town in England had gone to. She had hopes and dreams, and would spend her weekends in London visiting museums with punk rock hair shaved on one side. Now, she was a sad sack, staring at herself in the mirror, popping another pill just to get some chemically induced rest. What had I to show for my life? What had Edward to show for it? What would be my legacy here on this planet? That's when I realized, with a crushing blow to my ego, that I desired children. The wanting need became hard to break free from once I knew it was what I wanted. I just turned 36 on my last birthday. I was older, for sure. But why now? Why hadn't the desire hit me when Edward was still here and I was in my roaring 20s? Tears fell from my face as I thought about it. My time to conceive would be limited due to my age, so if I were to wait around much longer, my chances would be next to zero. I made my decision to go about conception the traditional way. I started to date again, only this time I used my skills in marketing to market myself in a way that would attract as many suitors as possible. I started with online dating instead of getting introduced to mutual acquaintances my friends knew. The first man that took me on a date was Nigel. He was a funny man with a small business near Lowestoft. I was attracted to him immediately and felt at once like he and I could get serious rather fast. We went on 2 more dates following our first encounter, but on the 3rd date, just as we were finishing up our dinner, where you think you'll be making eggs and serving them naked with mimosas, well, he says the most awful thing. "You know, before we go any further, I want you to know that I'm a sexual offender." It isn't what it sounds like. I was 26 and she was 15 at the time. I thought she was older. She certainly looked it, but she lied to me because, well, she was lying to her roommate. She was working at a bar and had run away from home. We were dating for a while, but then her mum saw her on the street with me, and the next thing I know, she's living at home again with her parents, and I'm in jail trying to put together the pieces. "You had to be joking," I thought to myself. I bid him good night and promptly deleted his telephone number from my contact list and blocked him for good measure. The bad online dating didn't stop there. and more ridiculous encounters followed suit until I just gave up and decided to go the non-traditional method and try artificial insemination. It wasn't ideal, but man or no man, I wanted a child. Once I completed a series of tests, such as blood, fertility, and tissue samples, I was given the green light to move forward. I made my appointment on a Tuesday at a clinic, and as I sat in front of the doctor, he eyed me up and down before finally speaking. "You don't smoke?" "No." "You are under 40? "Yes." The doctor seemed very serious as he looked over his charts, and then began to go over the test results once again. After about 3 separate IVF trials, I was provided a pregnancy test and learned that I was not pregnant. I was disappointed, and now being the 3rd time, I was going to be responsible to pay for additional treatments not already part of my medical plan. This could get expensive, and as I sat on the train headed home for the city, I looked out of the window thinking of Edward and how much I missed him right now. Just then, as fate would have it, I happened to be scrolling through my Facebook newsfeed when a clinical research advertisement popped up. Having trouble conceiving? Or have you already been through painful IVF therapies? Call this number and you may be a candidate for a paying clinical research trial. I nearly jumped out of my seat, and when I got off the train, I went straight home and called the number. I spoke to a nice woman who set me up an appointment to meet with a research assistant at Dolce Laboratories. I'd never heard of it, but I arrived on time and I sat in the small waiting room. It was a posh little office with white floors and glass walls. On the secretary's desk was an enormous purple orchid. She was very pretty and dressed in very nice clothing. I could tell they must have been Gucci because I owned the knockoff version of the very same blouse. I was nervous and could feel my hands sweating as I fumbled around and bit my nails. The secretary got a phone call on her tiny headset and then smiled at me. "Dr. Renee will see you now." She took me to an office at the far end of a long hallway that smelled like bleach, and then, when I went in, I faced a short, friendly woman with a large smile on her round face. "Hi, I'm Dr. Renee Randall. Please, won't you sit down?" "It's a pleasure to meet you, Jacqueline." "Likewise," I said, smiling at the short, dark-haired doctor who could be my savior. "Tell me about yourself, Jacqueline." "Well, I'm 36, widowed going on 3 years now. I've been through IVF therapies in the past and they didn't work." "What made you decide to contact us?" "Hope, I guess. I was hoping you could help me. After all, what do I have to lose?" She smiled, nodding, and then handed me a form to fill out. "Everything will be kept anonymous because this is a trial, so your name will not be listed in the research, only the results of the trial. We'll need to complete a background check, blood and tissue tests, obviously, as well as fertility testing. One other thing that we need you to consent to is that psychiatric evaluations will also be required throughout. We will require a letter of recommendation by someone close to you. We'll also require you to sign a non-disclosure and provide at least 3 additional references. Once all of these requirements have been met, we'll take your information to our board and make a decision on whether or not you will be one of our participants. Oh, we also screen the donors to ensure they are disease-free." I held the form in my hand, feeling suddenly very overwhelmed by all of this. I wondered what sort of trial this was going to be, considering all the extra testing and references required. I agreed to all the additional work, and once I completed all the tests, provided the references and the letter of recommendations made by my good friend Laura, I was a nervous wreck, waiting on them to make their decision on whether I would be a participant. I was at the park the day I got the call I'd been waiting on, with my best friend Laura. who was sitting on a blanket in front of me, while her 2 young sons played in the mud. Why on earth would anyone purposefully do this? She laughed at her sons as they seemed to be getting dirtier by the second. Oh, I don't know. I think you have a pretty nice gig here, I said, smiling at her. You know, motherhood is amazing, but it definitely has its downside. God, there are days I literally want to hang myself from the rafters in my attic. I shook my head, laughing at her. You don't mean that. Just then her youngest son came over and tackled her, putting mud all over her neck and white blouse. Hey! Look, Mommy, my fingerprints. Now you have them on you, he laughed. Do you see what I mean? She looked at me. Boys, why don't you go and play on the swings now? Her sons ran away, completely ignoring her, as they went toward where they'd just come from and began throwing mud at each other. I chuckled at Laura as she tried to get the mud off her shirt. God, my children aren't human. I'm convinced of it. I blame their father's gene pool. We laughed, and as we sat there, I got a call on my cellular. Oh, I think it's the research clinic, I said, staring at Laura in a panic. Well, what are you waiting for? Answer the damn thing. Your future of being a mother to little monsters awaits you, she said with a silly look on her face. Hello? Jacqueline Dunkirk? Yes, speaking. Dr. Renee Randall here. I just wanted to let you know that you've been selected to participate in the fertility trial. Oh my God! Oh, that's wonderful news! Laura looked at me and put her arm around me, joining in my excitement. Congratulations, Jacqueline. There'll be a package delivered in 3 to 7 days with the fertility device inside of it and instructions on what to do with it. You'll be given 12 weeks to complete the trial, which is 3 different ovulation periods. Please, if you have any questions at all, phone our office. However, everything should be self-explanatory. I got off the phone with Dr. Randall and looked at Laura as tears fell down my face. I was so excited, and Laura matched my own excitement with hers as she hugged me. The package took longer than expected to arrive, to the point I was ready to contact Dr. Randall and ask her if they'd changed their minds. Laura was over having tea with me the afternoon the delivery came. There was no warning, just a loud knock at my door that startled me, and it caused me to almost drop my cup of tea that I was holding. Laura and I both looked at one another, and I went to the front door to see who it was. I opened the door to a young man wearing black sunglasses, so you could barely see his face. Mom, are you Jacqueline Dunkirk? Yes. Oh, please sign here. I signed for the package, and then the man who had the large crate on a dolly wheeled it past both myself and Laura. We looked at one another as the man bid us goodbye and walked out my front door and got into a large black delivery truck with tinted windows so you couldn't see inside. I shut the door and then looked at the large crate, which was a bit taller than my icebox. "Oh, is that your package?" asked Laura. I went over to the box, and on the side it had a red marking that said, "Product of Dulce Laboratories Worldwide." "Oh, yeah, it looks like," I said, confused. "Jeez, whatever's in that is as big as my 2-in-1 laundry unit." She smirked at me. I shot Laura a look, rolling my eyes. I tried to open the crate, but there was no latch to pull. Oh, I think I'm going to need a crowbar. Oh, I think Reggie has one in his toolbox he keeps in the back of my trunk. I nodded, and she ran to her car to get it. When she came back, we used the crowbar to tug at the door for what seemed like ages, and then we got the door off of it. We both stood back in amazement. Holy shit, Jackie. Is this for real? Laura burst out laughing then. So they sent you a sex doll then? I scowled at the thought as I looked at it. Inside the tall crate was a man. He was tall, muscular, tan, dark hair and eyes. His skin was very human-like, not like a plastic doll at all. It looked soft to the touch, but I dared not touch it. I was a bit creeped out by his lifelike appearance. He wore only white boxers, and his front was covered in a very sheer plastic wrapping. I slowly removed it to find that he was stored in a gel-like substance, the consistency of one of those air fresheners. Around his large neck was a set of instructions. I took them in my hand, and then Laura and I both looked at them. Laura grabbed them from me and read them out loud. "Hello, my name is George. To activate me, you will need to press the button at the small of my back. Only you will be able to activate me with the use of your fingerprint." "Oh, no," I said to Laura, grabbing the instructions from her. "This is too much. I'm calling that doctor right now to give her a piece of my mind." Laura looked at me, concerned. "Are you sure? You mean you don't want to see what it's all about, even a little bit?" Tears began to stream down my face, and Laura nodded, taking it as her cue to leave me alone. After Laura left the house, I pulled out my phone to call Dr. Randall, using the direct line she'd provided to me. "Dr. Renee Randall here." "Hello, Doctor. This is Jackie Dunkirk phoning you. Your package arrived about 15 minutes ago. I honestly don't know what to say. Is this a joke?" "No, not at all." "Have you activated George yet?" "Absolutely not." "Jackie, please don't be alarmed. This is a trial. He is a robot that specializes in acting like a real partner. He has a pre-programmed simulation to be a gentle and loving partner through the reproductive process. He is one of our first prototypes, based on our research done in numerous controlled environments and through use of psychological testing. He's designed to be an IVF device that is more personal. Through our research, we have found that most women don't conceive in an unloving environment, nor do they often conceive in the impersonal IVF procedures most clinics currently use. You see, most mothers need to be in a loving environment and have a support system, and through doing this trial, you will help others exactly like you." "This is madness. How does it even work?" "He will learn your routines and help you that way. He will be the man that you need. He is your perfect mate during this process." "Oh my God," I said, trying to grasp the concept of what was going on. You see, most of our research that has been done in prisons worldwide has proven that human beings need love from before conception until after. Just keep George for a few days, and if it isn't working, we can deactivate him from our central office, and one of our men will come and pick him up. Isn't that what you wanted, Jackie? A child to call your very own? What if George can offer that to you?" I looked at the man in the box with the closed eyes, and after a long pause, I made up my mind to try. I followed the instructions and pressed my index finger to the tiny box feature on the small of his lower back. Within seconds, I heard a beeping sound, and then this thing took a deep breath and opened its eyes. I backed away from it, and he stared at me intently for a second, blinked twice, then smiled a friendly little smile at me. "Hello, Jackie. I'm George. It's very nice to meet you." His voice was deep, but soft and unthreatening. I stood watching him, waiting for him to do something, and then he moved to bend over and detach a wire that was wrapped around his ankle. He stepped out of the tall crate and walked over to me and held out his large hand. I just looked up at him and couldn't say anything. I just stood in shock. "Please don't be afraid. I can tell your pulse is raised and your brow is sweating. Perhaps you could use a drink." He eyes the room, and without having ever been to my home before, he walked towards my liquor cabinet and opened it. He poured me a drink in a glass and added ice to it from my freezer. He handed it to me, smiling, and I began to laugh uncontrollably. "You're in shock. Here, drink up." I took a sip, and my hand shook, and then I chugged the remaining whiskey. He took the glass from me and laughed. He actually laughed, as though he were a human being. I looked up at him, and I had to admit, even to myself, well, he was gorgeous. He was tall and protective looking, but there was something about his dark brown eyes. They were warm, almost lifelike. I couldn't explain. They glistened with a reddish hue and appeared thoughtful. I found myself slowly relaxing around him and found that he caught on very quickly to my routine. When I went to work, he had my coffee ready at exactly the time I needed it. My clothes were pressed and hung, and my house was spotless. He was my very own robot maid service. Days passed, and nothing happened between us that would make you ever think that his entire purpose of being created was to help me create human life. We played chess, and I got used to him. It was nice to have someone around after being alone for the last 3 years. Then, one evening, I'd just come home from work when it happened. George was waiting by the front door, watching me intently as he opened it for me. "Hello, George. You're looking a bit serious," I joked, considering, well, he was a robot. "It is time." "Time for what?" I was genuinely confused. "For me to help you conceive a child. Your body told me this morning you were nearing ovulation. Your temperature is raised as well, and we only have a short window of opportunity. Won't you join me in the bedroom?" I felt like I was going to faint. "George, I think perhaps I need to fully prepare for this." "I understand, but it's already been 2 weeks, and you only get 3 trials with me." I was genuinely nervous and found myself stumbling over my words. "I need a moment to think." "Perhaps you could use a drink." He smiled at me. "That too," I said, looking at him. "Why don't you just relax? Do you like music?" "Love it." Just then my Alexa began to play soft jazz music on a volume not too loud or too soft. He had a drink in his hand faster than I could comprehend him preparing it. "Would you like to dance? Perhaps we could move to the music a bit so you can get used to touching me." I took a swig of my drink and a deep breath. He moved the hair from my face, tucking it behind my ears, and then gently placed his left hand around my hips, and in his right hand he took my own hand and began to slowly dance. This was odd even for me, but the alcohol had begun to take effect, and before I knew it, this robot was kissing me gently on the lips. Somewhere between dancing and his kissing me, it happened. I won't lie and say it wasn't good. It was outstanding. The way he moved was unlike any human man I'd ever been with. He was sweet, attentive, and romantic. The way he looked at me was like I was the most beautiful woman in the entire universe. The next morning, I awoke feeling awkward in my nakedness. I sat up in bed because I found that George was staring at me with a sort of gentle smile on his face. "You look embarrassed. Please don't be. Jackie, you are beautiful." Ah. There, he said it. Damn him. It was like he could read my mind. "How did you know when to arrive?" I asked, awkwardly. "I'm prepared to hold off until you arrive, and then I do." "Yes, but you arrived and already had... you have sperm ready for me. How does that work? Temperature controlled. It is stored up in me for up to 3 months, frozen for the most part, until you begin to ovulate, and then it begins to thaw. I hope I'm not making light of what is a very beautiful thing, creating life. No, I was just curious. It's also incredibly weird to me. Yes, I can see how you would think so. Would you like me to run you a bath? I nodded, and then he prepared my bath water. It wasn't too hot, not too cold, just perfect, like everything else he did for me. It was, in a sense, too good to be true. Laura called later that day to see how I was holding up. I don't know how to describe it, I told her. He sounds like every woman's fantasy. Hey, want to do lunch later today? I agreed, and Laura met me in the late afternoon. When she got to the door, George opened it before I could, and he stood there looking at her. Can't describe the look on his face, but it was as though he were reading her. Hello, I'm George. Yeah, and I'm the Queen, Laura said, dismissive of him, and walked over to me. Oh, he's creepy, isn't he? I rolled my eyes at her, and I noticed George was only eyeing Laura. Are you sure you should go now? I detect you'll be ovulating again in a few hours. Laura looked at me and looked back at George. Oh, bugger off. She's going with me. I looked at George as Laura pulled me with her out of the door. George looked at me like a puppy dog, but I noticed something in his eyes when he looked at Laura. Could it be jealousy? Surely not. He was simply protective, the way Dr. Randall had said he was supposed to be. The lunch I had with Laura went on longer than I thought, and then it turned into dinner and a few glasses of wine. I knew I shouldn't, but I needed a break from all the baby-making business. When I arrived home, all the lights were off in my house, and at first I began to feel frightened that something was wrong. However, when I opened the door, George had lit candles and was standing in the kitchen with a plate of shrimp cocktail and a sweet smile on his face. I thought you might be hungry. Did you eat with Laura while you were out? I sighed and shook my head. Ooh, the shrimp looks delicious. How did you learn to cook and prepare drinks and meals? I'm programmed to know a little bit of everything. I smiled, and he came over to me and kissed my cheek. Once again, I found myself in his strong arms, pretending I was unaware he was only a computer on 2 legs. The weeks rolled by, and while the first trial didn't go the way I'd hoped, there was still hope after our last encounter. I was sitting in my kitchen having a glass of water and some toast, when George came in wearing a sweet smile. I have amazing news. The trial is over, and you are pregnant. I looked at him, puzzled for a moment, and then he walked over to me and pricked my finger. I've been able to detect the chemical change in your body, and with this tiny blood sample, I'll test it to be sure. But you are exactly 3 weeks along. I stood up, with tears in my eyes. Are you sure? I'm required to send over the test to Dr. Randall for her review, but I am positive. I was overcome with a joy I'd never experienced before. The last few weeks seemed to fly by, as George, per requirement, remained to help me until he was required to go. It was the last week he would be with me, when I noticed a change in George. He seemed a bit sad, and to be honest, I was feeling rather sad at losing him. I don't want to go, Jackie. I don't really want you to go either, George. I rather like having you here. Perhaps we could see if I could stay on longer. I thought about it for a moment, and I welcomed the idea. Being alone when you have a child is bad enough, But if George could stay on and help me during the first few months, that would be even better. I went to see Dr. Randall the next day, so I could ask for an extension. No, I'm afraid that isn't possible. Why does he have to go so soon? 12 weeks is all he was programmed for, Jackie. He must be sent back the way he came, not a moment before or a moment after. Someone will be round next Tuesday to pick him up. Dr. Randall was stern about it, and her decision was unwavering. I didn't want George to go. I broke the news to him when I arrived home, but he wasn't very happy about it. I don't have to go. Not if you don't answer the door. I looked at George and smiled empathetically. She said you're only programmed for 12 weeks. But I learned from you, Jackie. I nodded in agreement, and he put his arms around me, holding on to me. It was hard to forget he wasn't a human being in moments like this. He was so soft, so real. Tuesday came, and just like Dr. Randall said, someone came to my house and expected George to be in a nice box just the way he came. To be honest, it felt wrong keeping poor George in a box. We stood by the door watching to ensure the man left. The man hesitated and then walked away, and off he drove in his all-black delivery truck. George high-fived me, and we had a good laugh. That night George danced with me, and we held each other while I fell asleep on his chest. The next morning, I awoke expecting George to be in the room next to me. I got out of bed and walked into the kitchen, but there was no sign of him. When I looked around the house, that's when I saw it. Laura was laying in my backyard. Blood covered my lawn, and the look on George's face was like nothing I'd ever seen. I knew with every fiber of my being she was dead. I wanted to run to her, to help her, to save her. But then he looked up at me. He noticed I was there, and he saw the terror on my face, and smiled at me as though he were trying to comfort me. Jackie, she came here this morning, and she wasn't very nice to me when I told her I was staying. She called me a stupid robot, and I tried to tell her I love you. She wouldn't listen to reason, so I showed her. I showed her and her smart mouth good, didn't I? I ran from George then and grabbed my phone. I hid in the bathroom, locking the door behind me. My hands shook as I tried to dial the number to Dr. Randall's office. I got her voicemail, so I dialed the telephone number that had been provided to me in case there was a malfunction with George. Hello. Thank you for calling Dulce Laboratories. We're here to help the world become a better place one day at a time. Damn you! I screamed into the phone, pressing all the options until an operator came on. Dulce Laboratories, Jenny speaking, a pleasant voice said to me. I need help. I need it now. What seems to be the issue? My robot's trying to kill me, I cried into the phone. I'm sorry, ma'am. I couldn't make out what you were saying. Do you have an item number so I can look up your device? Please help me, I screamed hysterically into the phone. There was a loud banging on my bathroom door. And then I saw it. The hinges on the door were coming undone. Jackie, I did it to help you, to help us. I heard the door handle jiggle, and then I heard what sounded like an electric drill going in the screws on the door. The bastard was taking off the door one screw after another. I was sure he was going to kill me if he got his hands on me. My hands shook as I dialed the police, my hands shaking as I pressed the buttons. 9, then 9. Then before I could hit the last button, I heard a loud explosion. I didn't know if it was a gun or a bomb going off in my house. I was too frightened to move. The door opened to my bathroom, and I screamed before I could see who it was. 2 men in black stood over me, and one of them was standing over George. I looked down at the monster and saw he was bleeding. George had blood coming out of him, and it was running into my hallway. I watched the crimson liquid slowly move towards where I was crouched on my bathroom floor. I looked up at the men, one of who was on the phone. "Yep, we got him, but there was a casualty." "Yep, just like the other one," he was saying as he walked away. The other man was eyeing me empathetically and helped me up off the floor. The police never came because Dolce Laboratories had come and cleaned up the mess. They cleaned my house, and they even tried their best with Laura. Luckily for both Laura and I, she wasn't dead. She'd suffered a very bad beating, but was recovering in hospital. Dolce made it look like a car accident. I had so many questions for Dr. Randall. I refused to let it go. Finally, after weeks of pressing her office to get answers about what happened with George, I was granted a meeting. "First, I need you to sign this non-disclosure form before I tell you the truth. We have to be sure that no one will ever find out about what happened." She held out the form, and I signed my name quickly and then shoved it back into her face. "Let me apologize for what happened with George." "I don't understand. I thought you said he was to be protective, comforting, helpful." "George was programmed for exactly a 12-week trial. He was made for women like yourself who were of a certain age, single, in need of a kind soul to make them feel good about themselves. Past 12 weeks, we didn't have a finished script. When you didn't return George, we didn't come in guns blazing to take him back. We wanted to see what would happen. Unfortunately, there are still some kinks to work out." "He was bleeding. How is that even possible?" Dr. Randall looked guiltily at me, and then she stood up as though she were trying to find the right words. "That is because he used to be human, like you." I looked at her, stunned, taking in short breaths to keep myself from freaking out. "You mean he was human, and that's why he looked so lifelike?" "In the United States, there are many men on death row. Instead of dying and forever being useless, we've given some of them the opportunity to donate their bodies to science here in England through one of our affiliate labs in Ohio, and that is how we obtained George. So instead of a formal execution, we rebuilt them and reprogrammed their brains using state-of-the-art technology. It's only a computer living inside of a human being, fitted with mechanical parts." "You mean George was a criminal?" "Yes. You are the third person to complete a trial with George. So far, you were the lucky one. I'm sorry to say all the others had worse incidents with George." I sat looking at Dr. Randall in disgust. "George did seem to have an attachment to you that went far beyond what happened with the others." "What was his crime when he was alive?" "I'd rather not go into specifics. Just tell me." "He murdered his wife because she left him. After she took out a restraining order, he stalked her, got her alone one night, then he stabbed her 83 times. He was sentenced to death because of the way he mangled the body. He stabbed her so hard in the neck, she was nearly decapitated." "And the other trial patients?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss that with you." "My baby? What about it? Should I worry about it? What did you do with George?" "Oh, he was sent back for more intensive reprogramming." I stood and walked out of Dr. Randall's office. I never spoke of what happened to anyone, well, because of legal ramifications. My daughter was born healthy, and I was happy about that. Laura went on to live a normal life and never remembered much about that day that George nearly beat her to death. Some months later, I was in the park with my young daughter and a friend from work. When I saw a man with a young woman. He was holding her hand, and then, when he stood up, he turned to look at me, still smiling. I sat, feeling terrorized, as the young man approached me and my friend. The young woman was oblivious, as I had once been. There stood George, standing over me, looking at my daughter. "Oh, she is quite lovely, isn't she?" he asked the young woman with him, and she nodded. "How old?" asked the young woman, smiling. 6 months, I said, barely able to get the words out. And they walked away, and I hoped that he had indeed forgotten me. I stood up to go, and my friend and I had to pass them on the way out of the park. George looked at me, smiling as we went. "It was really great seeing you again, Jackie."
It turns out that the plague is still out there. Turns out we're not the only ones interested in the disease. I think I should say the disease is, in the plural. Apparently, there are 3 kinds of plague in existence. There's the infamous bubonic plague, which infects the lymphatic system, causing a swelling of lymph nodes which leads to the appearance of the buboes. Then there are the less visible, but far deadlier kinds, pneumonic and septicemic, infection of the lungs and blood, respectively. Honestly, I had no idea there were 3 types of plague. I only found that out after getting sick with 2 of the 3 variants. Well, at least that's what I think. I was completely fucked up at one point, to the point of hallucinating a bird-headed alien thing. Oh, 2 of my roommates died from whatever we had. Young, healthy men don't tend to die from the flu. Everything's been upside down recently. I don't know what's wrong and what's right. Some days I genuinely think I'm stuck in a dream, but then I snap back into reality. Zane and Adam's rooms are empty. They're not coming back. Chris and I didn't make it to the funerals. We told them we weren't sure if we were clear yet. Well, that was a lie. We just couldn't handle the truth. I'm not sure I still can. Everything is just so different now. It all started with a decomposing corpse of a cat Adam found at our doorstep in February. He kind of mentioned it as a side remark during that afternoon, saying he found it when he went out to work, and he tossed it as far away as he could have from the apartment. 3 days later, he came down with a stomach bug, or so we thought. It started with stomach aches, nausea, diarrhea, and vomiting. Soon enough, he was bedridden, paralyzed with fever. We just thought he was having the flu. It was the season, and there was a massive storm raging at the time. Well, it was so bad we'd even lose electricity from time to time. By the end of that same week, we were all feeling the same supposed flu. My head was constantly pounding, and my body felt weak and almost numb. My digestive system went second. I started vomiting like crazy on the 2nd day of my illness. It was so bad I couldn't put anything in my mouth. The mere idea of swallowing made me throw up. Chris and Zane were complaining of chest pain and having difficulty breathing. I wasn't really surprised. They were coughing so badly, one would think they were about to have a lung collapse on them. On my 3rd day of the illness, All 4 of us were bedridden, completely incapacitated. We just stayed in the living room together, and I guess we all got unbearably weak overnight together, probably watching some movie or something. It wasn't about taking care of each other. I mean, of course, we did care for Adam when he was in this alone, although we didn't really devote all of our time to him, and everything just happened so fast, and all 4 of us were basically living corpses within the blink of an eye. I mean, we didn't see the doctor because we all thought we'd be fine, and when we knew we wouldn't be just fine, it was already too late. And then the electricity went out of the window due to the crazy storm outside. I remember jokingly complaining about being kicked out, since it seemed like none of us would be able to make any money anytime soon. We all found it so hilarious, we laughed until our entire bodies hurt. Not that much aversion was needed to get there. I kept making jokes and fooling around during my waking hours because I was genuinely scared. I'd never felt so hurt and weak before. I'd never felt so worn out. Hell, I'd never been this sick up to this point. Not to mention how I was losing feeling in my legs from time to time, and how my feet were all bruised up from, well, nothing really. I didn't tell the other guys about this. I didn't want them worrying. They were worn out enough already. 6 days into my illness, I couldn't really walk anymore. I just woke up that day, not even feeling my legs. The other guys were still asleep, so I tried my best not to scream like a little child. I mean, I couldn't even feel my freaking legs. I smacked at my thighs a few times, but nothing. I felt almost nothing. I mean, my legs registered nothing. My fist felt as if I'd been beating on a punching bag. I nudged my feet, but they wouldn't move. I had to shift my legs manually off my bed in order to try and stand up. I couldn't get myself to stand up straight. Once I pulled myself up to my feet, I felt dizzy and my legs felt like they were made of paper, so I immediately sat back down. That's when the pain from my wrists came knocking at my mind's door. I feared the worst. The idea that I'd managed to break my arms flooded my mind. I felt my heart race like crazy for a moment. I slowly lifted my hands up and noticed how my wrists were only red and blue. It was only bruising. Only bruising, I thought. I threw myself back down to my bed and immediately felt nauseous again. It was the worst nausea ever. I felt like something was making its way up my esophagus, even though I hadn't eaten properly in a while. So I just threw up. It stung so bad, and my stomach felt like I'd swallowed nails. Everything burned and stabbed inside. I felt like I had a bomb filled with shrapnel in my guts. Obviously, the noise woke everyone up. I didn't pay attention to anything, because I was in so much pain. My whole body was becoming numb with pain. I felt something run down from my nose and onto my lips. I remember running my hand across my face and looking at it. There was blood on my hand. Blood was running across my lips. And then everything started spinning as if I was on a roller coaster. I felt so lightheaded, I couldn't even form words in my head. I felt as if I was floating for a few moments, and then I came crashing down hard. My chest seized up, as if I was being crushed under a bed of pure concrete. I coughed, and coughed, and coughed. My throat went up in flames. I know Chris, who was faring the best out of all of us, was screaming something. At least, I think he was screaming. No clue what he was screaming, though. I kind of blocked everything out involuntarily. I was simply focused on getting that coughing fit out of my system. My chest was on fire. My throat was on fire. I felt something sticky coming out of my mouth with each passing cough. It was thicker than sputum. I didn't even think about it at the time. Everything just kind of went grey on me, and I passed out as the screams of my body trailed off into nothingness. I had a million dreams about being operated on by someone. I wouldn't call that a doctor. I mean, he was cutting me up and stuff, but it never hurt or anything. It's like I was just floating above my bed, and this person, this thing, I don't know, it was drawing my blood in a few of those dreams. I don't even know. It felt so weird, as if I was out of my own body. I wouldn't call it an out-of-body experience because, well, I'm clearly alive, and I know that I was just dreaming. Well, at least I think I was dreaming. I woke up covered in a white sheet. I removed it from my face, and the sunlight that came into contact with my skin sent me into a spiral of pain and vertigo. I closed my eyes shut and turned my head away. I was trying to make sense of what was going on. To my knowledge, there was a storm raging outside a few hours ago, and when I woke up, it was sunny. I felt lighter than before, too, and could clearly sense my legs. I was feeling as if a truck had run over me, but still, I felt like I could actually somewhat operate my body. The sunlight was becoming less and less painful on my form, and I forced myself to look around. Everything seemed the same for the first moment or so. Then I noticed 2 white body bags laying where I remember Zane and Adam being when I passed out. What the fuck? I murmured to myself, sitting up as morbid thoughts flooded my mind. A monotone, sort of robotic voice cracked from behind me. It said something weird, in Russian, I think. Oh, I know what Russian sounds like, but this wasn't it. The sound freaked me out. I was wondering all these crazy things. My heartbeat rose so quickly I felt lightheaded again. I was feeling myself slip out of it once more. And the voice spoke once again, in a heavily accented English. "Oh, you awake? Good." I forced myself to turn around as slowly as I could to see this BDSM-looking person, thing, with a bird mask on it. It looked like a plague doctor from the movies, but with a bunch of belts all around it. "You had plague. I'm sorry." The thing spoke again. "What?" I managed to blurt out. I was genuinely convinced it was the angel of death for a moment. "You sick? Very." The creature pointed its finger at me. "I fix," it continued. "What the hell are you talking about?" I said with some confidence in my words, as my breathing became shallower and my heartbeat fastened, making my whole body tense up. The thing lowered its head and poked at something on one of its wrists. "Ah, there," he proclaimed with confidence. "Now, my translator's working properly. I am here to help you recover from a particularly violent strain of the Yersinia pestis, otherwise known as the plague." "I have the plague?" I asked the creature, dumbfounded. "Yes, you had it. Both your blood and lungs were infected, but I've since cleared it out of you," the creature proclaimed once more, pointing. This time it pointed at a pulsating fabric-laced thing that was laying on the floor and connected to my arm by a thin tube. I rubbed my eyes as my headache began subsiding slowly. "What are you?" "I am a doctor. I came here to help you get rid of this bane before it kills you and spreads elsewhere. It seemed to me like you don't have a cure for this condition. My people have suffered greatly from it." It went on and on. "We've been driven to the brink of infection by this bane. It was too late by the time we discovered a cure, and now there are not many of us left. Please trust my intentions. I only want to spare your kind the suffering that I had to endure." What? I mumbled. I was too weak to comprehend what it was saying to me. The creature chuckled and ordered me to rest. So I did. I was too confused and tired to argue. I even considered this being part of my fever dreams, but then I noticed he was doing something to Chris. Hey, what are you doing to him? I inquired weakly. Replacing his bioplasma. What's the word? Blood. Yes, blood. I am replacing his blood. That's the only way, the creature reassured me. Will he be all right? Yes, most certainly. What about the other two? Did you cure them? The creature paused for a moment. What is it? I insisted. Unfortunately, I didn't make it in time. Once I arrived, they were no longer among the living. I could detect the sorrow in his voice, but it didn't help in the least. I broke down screaming at the creature, needlessly blaming it for the 2 deaths of my best friends. I forced myself out of the bed and clumsily made my way towards the creature, who was standing with his back turned to me. I grabbed this thing, which was taller than me by about a whole head, and tried to turn it to face me, demanding from it to fix my diseased friends. It kept on insisting that it couldn't. I didn't let up, and an argument ensued. The thing finally yielded. Fine, there are your friends, he remarked as he made some sort of movement with his fingers. The sound of thrashing came out from both of the body bags. I turned around to see the body bags being torn apart from the inside. My heartbeat skyrocketed as I was watching the madness in front of me unfold. A blackened arm tore through one of the body bags. Another followed suit, and a blackened, bloated face sprung out of the body bag. It was contorted into an agonized scream, and the stench. God, that stench. I stood there, frozen in shock until my knees buckled and I fell into a puddle of dried-up blood and bile. The second body sprang forth from its body bag and emitted terrible, gurgling sounds. I felt myself get sick again. I wanted to throw up so badly, but there was nothing to throw up. Stop, I begged. I couldn't handle the smell, and I sure as hell couldn't handle the sight. I can't. I feel like I'm going to hyperventilate just thinking about this again. Holy shit. You wanted this, the creature beaconed. I thought, I mumbled. It retorted. I told you. I wished I could fix them, but I cannot. Please, make it stop, please. I burst out into tears. The abominations that were once my friends collapsed back into their body bags, and I crumpled into a ball on the floor and began wailing. The creature didn't utter a sound. It just kept on doing whatever it was doing to Chris until it was finished. That came fairly soon after I'd broken down on the floor. I kept on mourning the loss of my mates, even after I'd run out of tears to cry. I just rolled around in the organic waste on the floor, talking to myself about how I couldn't believe what was becoming of my life. At some point, this creature, this plague doctor, simply gathered up all of his stuff and left. But before he left, he told me that Chris and I were going to be all right. I couldn't help but laugh at his attempt to calm me down, and then he just left. I'll be honest here. I'm not entirely sure if what I'd seen there was real or just some sickness-related hallucination, like I've mentioned before. So, it turns out I've been asleep for about 2 months. Once that thing left, I turned on the TV to find out It was April. Another thing I found out after the plague doctor left and took the corpses of my friends with him is that they were decomposing before he arrived. I found the disgusting decomposition marks all over the mattresses they'd been lying on. Once Chris and I got enough strength up to leave our resting spots the following day, after my encounter with the plague doctor, we headed out to the local police station and tried to explain everything. It turned out that we indeed did have traces of the plague bacteria that our bodies were fighting off, as if we'd been administered some powerful cure. No one has really been able to explain my comatose state, and the way I shook it off when I woke up. Oh, and yeah, I did mention a funeral. Well, after 3 weeks of searching, the police located the bodies of Zane Garnham and Adam Siniski in a forest clearing not far out of town, surrounded by a bunch of dead animals. And they were all radioactive as fuck. October 10th, 2019. Today was a good day. Recently all the diary entries were either gloomy, angry, or downright desperate, but not today. I saw my mom walk again. Oh, just the sight of her shaking, grasping for balance as she covers the distance between her hospital bed to the clothes hanger, no more than a meter away. It brought tears to my eyes. It actually made me cry like the neighbor's baby in the middle of the night. It was genuinely just so amazing. 2 weeks ago, I really thought I'd lost her. When she didn't pick up the phone the whole day, this thought that something bad had happened to her just crossed my mind. When this vicious, pulsating image of her dying out, whispering for help while reaching out for the phone that was ringing my name on the display just a few centimeters away, but impossibly out of range of her paralyzed hands. When all this was going on in the back of my mind, slowly materializing with every failed call. Every time I would press the green icon and the line would beep relentlessly, lifelessly, I would feel the rushing fear, the chill. As I was putting down my phone, the nightmare of her casket going down into the cold ground was gradually seeping into reality. First time I tried dialing her was at noon, during my lunch break. Maybe she was at the shop and didn't hear. 1 hour later, still nothing. Each and every subsequent try became incrementally closer to the previous one. By 20 to 3, the display read 11 failed calls, and I was properly scared. She was getting old, and I know, old people forget and oftentimes put their phones in places they can't hear them, but this is Mum. No, not her. So I just stood up and left the office. Gary protested, but, fuck Gary. It seems I won't be seeing his stupid face much in the future anyway. I had to go. If I waited until 5, she'd be stuck in rush hour, and if not Mother, then I'd be the one having a heart attack. Thankfully, she lives close to my workplace. The trip is just 10 to 13 minutes in normal circumstances. Run 2 red lights and drive well over the limit, it becomes more like 4. I saw at least 2 cameras flash at me, but my wallet's ready. As I got into her building, everything was quiet. There were no ambulances, no worried neighbors. Even her best friend, old man-eater Lara, even she wasn't out there in the lobby, gossiping about how much my love life sucks. I think my misfortunes with Tina really amused her. Gave her some sort of sick kick. But, well, recently, I've been a fan of the F word, so F her too. I won't be hearing her breaking, screechy, and unbearably annoying voice after I go to China. I pressed the elevator button, but almost immediately realized it's ancient and slow, so instead I rushed up the stairs to the 4th floor. I flew up, and without as much as a breath, I sprinted directly to my mum's door, which was at the far end of the corridor. I slammed my hand on the bell, and then I started hammering on the door with my fist. "Mother!" I shouted, much like a madman, as I was hoping she opened the door with perplexed eyes and one of her trademark dishes sizzling in a pot she held in her hands, oblivious to the worry she'd made me experience. My own hand froze, mid-motion, as I focused my senses, flooding my ears with blood, hoping for a sign that indeed she was coming, that she was all right. In that moment, all I could hear was the most terrible sound of all. Nothingness. Complete and suffocating silence. In that instant, it seemed even the multitude of cars jammed like sardines in a can outside didn't make as much as a squeal or a clank. No, in that very moment, I felt truly alone in this world. My hands were cold, and they were trembling in a way I didn't think possible. I was panicking, out of breath and out of control. It took me what seemed like forever to thread the spare key into the lock. As the mechanism turned, the most terrible images started going through my mind. I could see my mother, dead on the floor, abundant foam escaping her purple, lifeless lips, her body colored in a way that no living human is. In my vision, she looked just like poor old Billy who died in the parking lot 2 years ago. I feared the worst. As I slammed the door open, I resumed shouting, but again, no response. Something was definitely wrong with Mother, with what I can describe as the most sickening and nauseating anticipation I've ever felt. I went from room to room, searching for the one person I genuinely love in this world. First was the living room, but there was nobody there. Next was her favorite place in the house, a sparkling new kitchen that I got her for her 60th anniversary. It did cost a pretty penny, but the smile on her face was so wide and so bright, truly priceless, giving a higher purpose to putting up with Gary, the self-righteous asshole. She wasn't there. I gave a sigh of relief in a momentary lapse of logic. She was somewhere in the apartment and I had to find her, to help her. Hoping it's not too late, I rushed towards the bedroom, passing by the door of the bathroom. It was this very same instance in time that my soul was ripped, cut to pieces by the sight my eyes had seen. My mother. She was there. Her head was resting on the floor and her body was half naked. Blue hue had spread throughout her skin. I collapsed, scrambling to make sense of what was there before me, facing, anticipating, putting my finger on her neck and feeling the faint, resonating pulse of her old, caring heart that had spent far too many beats in my name, for my sake. My whole being was sinking into a deep, endless hole as I reached out towards her. What if there was nothing? What if? That's the scariest thing about it at all. About death. What if this was it? No goodbyes, no time to settle what's left behind. When I die, I want to at least let people know that I was thinking about them in the end. What few words crossed my mind before all the words ceased to be, before I was no more. In that terrible moment of horrible expectations, I felt the one and only thing that could once more bring warmth back to the world. I felt her heart, barely beating through the coldness of her skin. Incredible relief, unfounded exultation. Feelings came to me that I never, ever felt before. I hugged her, giving her some of my own body heat, careful not to push too hard and worsen any fracture she might have. Shaking myself, I called emergency and through tears explained to them the situation. I shouted that they needed to hurry. So many times the operator must still be hearing my voice in her nightmares. The ambulance came in what they claim were a mere 6 minutes, but to me it felt like years. I recalled as I was a child and what me and Mum would do together. I remembered how happy she was when I held my master's degree in my hand. I really wanted her to stay with me. The paramedics arrived. They went through their checklists, and I understood nothing. Is she okay? What's going on? Is she okay? I kept on repeating like a broken radio stuck on the last bit of the cassette, hopelessly going in a loop. They didn't reply. They were too busy checking her vitals, administering a shot and putting her on a stretcher. I was getting desperate, confused and properly irritated. I was just about to snap when the more senior of the two paramedics turned to me and explained the situation. She's hypothermic, but that's likely because she fainted and spent around 2 hours in this state. The underlying cause of the seizure is currently unknown. There's evidence of trauma on her back, and her left hand might be broken. And again, this is most likely a result of the fall, but not the cause. We don't have the equipment here to tell you more. She needs to go to hospital ASAP. This was so unbelievable, and yet happening. I could well understand the words the doctor was saying, but he was so to the point, and talking about how my mother had broken her arm, as if it was such a matter-of-fact thing. I just didn't know what to say. I knew I would do whatever it would take to make her well again. What's the best place you can take her to? I inquired, knowing full well her insurance wouldn't cover anything besides the neighborhood clinic. Then again, I'm pretty sure she'd have better chance of surviving if we just let her stay on the floor, rather than taking her there. That would be St. Anna, he stated, without as much as a glint of hesitation in his eyes. Following that were 20 sleepless hours which I spent on a bench in the hospital, craving and only haphazardly receiving information about whatever was going on with Mom. As the new day dawned, so did a sliver of hope. The chief of the cardiology ward gracing me with his presence. He explained to me in layman's terms that her arteries were damaged and they had to insert stents in them to keep the blood flowing properly. This was all black magic to me, but I rejoiced at the part where he said she'd live and recover. I didn't manage to write a diary entry that day, and as Mum really seems to be doing well, I finally mustered the courage to write about the events that transpired. It all gives Black Friday a whole new meaning, honestly. Fingers crossed, I think the worst part is over. So back to today. Gary was his usual self, that is, a cock. He isn't taking well the fact I got chosen to move to the new office in China, but senior staff deemed he was, I quote, irreplaceable. So yeah, you're stuck, buddy. I hope you rot here and your fat wife keeps on beating you at night. Oh, and speaking about wives, things with Tina are just unbearable at this point. We have arguments every day, even when we don't actually see each other. The whole move to Beijing literally takes all my time and attention, and after I'm done with it, well, then we just never see each other again, and maybe a divorce from a distance. Yeah, I know I'm a coward for thinking this, but I really don't want to deal with her right now. I still have to sell my car, get a truckload of papers prepared, and deposited all over town. Obviously my mum requires a lot of attention too. Not that I blame her or anything, just that it's all too much for me right now. I need a break. Hope they have nice places in China. I don't think I'll be getting the chance to even get a good night's sleep until I land there. Definitely not if Tina continues on screeching all the damn time. I make it a point to never come home before 10, just to avoid as much of her as possible. I had to spend more than an hour at a gas station today, but it beats coming back. Oh, I swear, I feel like she'll knife me in my sleep one of these nights. Just the way she looks at me, There's this intense hatred oozing out. I think she knows what I did. She must. There's not much I can do right now, though. Everything, all my documents, my PC and my bed are in the house we share, and she should be happy she'll get to keep it after I'm gone. That's enough, right? I mean, I'm not saying I'm a gentleman or whatever, but at the end of the day, our relationship is over, and she gets a house for bearing with my sorry ass. People settle for less. Anyway, I'm dead tired. This'll be it for today. Oh, I hope tomorrow goes by fast. 11th of October, 2019. So, something funny happened. As today was Friday, I had to go to the Higher Education Degree Administration because it turns out they have a 10-day period to process requests. So, if I'm to fly to Asia the week after next, I really had to make sure my diploma would be verified by then. I go there. As usual, there's this sizable queue, and having no choice whatsoever, I take my place at the back. Little by little, we move like rats in a lab. The white light on the ceiling buzzes monotonously, much like 100 bees slowly banging their bodies into the glass, dying out in a noisy mess. Step, and then another. But not for long, as the lady at the desk stands up to take a break, the second one within the hour. I notice the very intrusive smell of sweat coming from this guy 3 people in front of me. It makes the air heavy and elusive. I think how much I hate people like him. People who not only have the indecency to skip a bath, but at the same time are arrogant enough to stand in the queue. In my queue. God. Judging by the balding top of his head, he was probably well in his 40s, most likely married. Well, his wife must be happy he won't ever cheat on her. Even a donkey would run away from that stench. My annoyance soon grew into repulsion, and then into scorn. My hands curled into fists. My mind was filled with ideas, images of me doing things to that guy. Things I dare not say. My breath became heavier. I started to tremble. I was excited, and then I was light. My vision failed me, my legs no longer having the strength to prop my body up, and I succumbed to an unexpected, nauseating fall. Someone caught me on the way down, barely able to prevent my head from hitting the floor. I could hear their voices, the distant yet raucous chanting of the men and women in the hall. Some of them were worried, but I felt, most of them were just annoyed. Nobody wanted to deal with a dying man on top of this damn queue. Well, I wasn't really dying. Why did I write that? Whatever. I guess the chronic lack of sleep is starting to take its toll. I could hear Tina murmur something in the middle of the night yesterday. It woke me up, and afterwards I just couldn't will myself back to sleep. I think I'll try the couch tonight. She's giving me those looks right now anyway. I'll just ignore her. She never understood why I write a diary anyway. Hey, if you want to reflect on what you do each day, how come you haven't killed yourself yet? She just said this out of the frickin' blue. You know what, Tina? I just can't be bothered at this point. I feel sick and tired out of my mind. So I'm just gonna sleep, and hopefully this time around, I won't wake up when you're trying to give me the creeps. 12th of October, 2019. Today was Saturday, and so I could spend some quality time with Mother. The doctor said she's recovering like a young girl, and she certainly looked it. We managed to stroll through the hospital park, and, man, she got better at walking than she used to be. Or perhaps I just got worse. At some point, though, she said something weird. Son, you should take it a bit easier. I know I caused you a ton of worries, but still, nothing's more important than your own health. No mother wants to bury their own boy. What? I exclaimed, surprised by how unexpectedly grim my mother's words were. I mean, look at this huge strand of white hair coming down the side of your head. Oh, you must be under a lot of stress, no? Morbid chills ran down my spine. For the love of God, I swear something strange was going on. I'm barely 30. I know I haven't been taking the best care of myself, but I did comb my hair before going out. Oh, perhaps a couple of white hairs here and there, but a strand? No, that was impossible. My ears got deaf with the rushing adrenaline. Mum was speaking words, but none of them were reaching me. I had to find my way to a mirror. What she was saying couldn't be true, but I also wanted to pretend like nothing was happening. Not so long ago, her life was hanging by a thread. I just couldn't trouble her. Sure enough, she proposed we rest on a bench, and I was happy to oblige. I offered I go buy us something from the nearest coffee shop and left her there. I rushed, running to the shop where I hoped I'd find a toilet, one that was bound to have a mirror on the wall. Storming in, I felt embarrassed as people turned their heads towards me, but my vexation was stronger than all else. I had to know. I went to the cashier and asked her if they had a bathroom. She looked at me with dread, her own hand trembling on its way to her open mouth. It was as if she saw something truly terrifying. Oh, what is going on with me? No words escaped her petrified expression, but still, she signed with her quivering eyes towards the right. I wasted no moments. I really had to know. I had to see the extent of the damage. I felt this disgusting metallic taste in my mouth as I opened the door. For an instant, I presumed my cardiovascular system had given up and my blood was gushing all out on the inside. Now, the mirror within sight, each and every breath felt harder, heavier. I had to look, but I was afraid because I knew something was off. Something was really wrong with me. I was sweating profusely. My vision was blurry. I was confused, not knowing what sensation to attribute to the fright, what to the ailment that had befallen me. I gathered my courage and my strength, and I looked. Oh, the man in front of me. It just couldn't be me. It wasn't a strand that was white. My whole hair had lost its colour, as if I'd bleached it. Even my hairdo, it wasn't what I remembered it to be. I looked so old. And my eyes, they were red, deep crimson red, dripping with sanguine tears and fear. I ran out, not caring or able to think about what the people in the cafe considered me to be. In fact, I hoped they saw me as a lunatic, a madman, because, well, then I'd be fine. Yeah, I'd drink up my meds, stay tucked inside the no-hands jacket and emerge out of it a sane, healthy man. But if they saw what I saw, then I just don't know. I tremble at the thought. It terrorizes me ever since. I raced towards Mother, a jumbled mess of thoughts and words spinning in my head, vertigo ransacking my afflicted mind. What was I to tell her? What explanation could I provide for the way I looked when I knew nothing myself? I'd paced no more than 20 meters when I heard this bone-rattling crack coming out of my right knee. Debilitating pain and terror followed soon, clenching and grasping at my very core. No, I couldn't let her see me. I had to somehow manage to find my way back to the car. There, I'd sit and collect myself. There, I'd pick up the phone and call the hospital. They'd take care of Mum. She'd gone through too much and come out on top. I couldn't throw all that away. I was either crazy or I was dying, and I had to protect her from myself. Run! Oh, I had to run before this, what I hoped was a fit of madness, overpower my fading conscience. All I needed was to reach my tiny metal box, close myself inside and recover in the safety of its shell. Oh, I always loved my little sporty Nissan, now more than ever, and it was in my sight. Going in, I put the radio on. Three Little Birds was playing, cushioning my clattering teeth into a halt, easing my breathing. Every little thing's gonna be alright, kept my soul from shattering, faced with the unknown threat hanging over me. Oh, thank God for Marley, I sighed, regaining most of my composure. Enough so I could ring the reception and make sure Mother would be alright as well. I'm sure she worries about me, how I looked and how I suddenly disappeared. Nevertheless, what could I have done? At least this way the nurses could lull her with some stupid excuse as to why I had to go so unexpectedly, rather than just having her see my face, my hair, and, ascertaining that something was really wrong with her child. What followed thereafter, I actually have little memory of. I felt drunk and dazed, muscle memory in the back of my brain allying together to bring me home in one piece. So, yeah, now I'm writing this. I was too afraid to look at the mirror. Not sure I want to know what horrors it would reveal. And speaking of horrors, Tina is still here. She sits at a chair on the dining table, opposite of me. She's awfully quiet today, but there's just something about her. Her eyes are filled with disgust, disdain, and seeing me look like I'm dying, they shine. Oh, happiness oozing out of them like pus from gangrenous limbs. The sight of her, it's unbearable. But also there's something about her. I feel she looks better today than usual. Is it because I've seldom seen her happy? Her skin looks smoother somehow. The many freckles that adorn her skin from spring to winter are now non-existent, and her wrinkles, etched on her face like the never-ending disapproving grimaces that she has towards me, even they have much receded. Is this all makeup? But then, she is acting weird. There's something that amuses her about me, and about my condition. What's she doing to me? Can my situation be in some way caused by her? But how? That's just impossible. It's crazy. Still, I rejoice at that thought. I much prefer I lose my mind than my life. I hope I'm better tomorrow. 13th of October, 2019. Oh, the 13th of October. Truly a cursed day for me. The phone rang earlier on, waking me up even though it was already early afternoon. I struggled to collect myself and pick it up, as everything was spinning before my eyes. The meter that separated me from my mobile device was much like a crevice in between two mountains, an abyss with no end. I only managed to accept the third call, and that was with great pain. My hands were shaking, my finger joints cracking under the otherwise banal weight of the light plastic phone. As I answered, it was someone who was calling for the car. My head was spinning, my brain blown to butter by the unbearable migraine that paralyzed my thoughts. The person on the other side of the line, he was talking, but all he said was muffled, muted by the agonizing pain rushing to my ears. We agreed, I think, that he comes to take a look at it later on today. Now. He's here now. He stands there, ringing at my doorbell. Tina stays behind me, expecting me to stand up and walk to him. Go out and complete what is perhaps the most important task on my way to leaving this God-forsaken place and flying all the way to China. She grins. She knows. I know. I know I won't be able to. My legs are far too weak. My head feels as if it's about to burst and split, much like lightning decimates a tree from the inside out. She smiles. She knows. She's anticipating this. I have to go. Maybe if I get away from here, maybe I'll be saved. He's going to go away soon. Are you sure you want to stay down and let him? She whispers in my ear. Her voice so gentle, yet the words she says so sad and cruel. Is she killing me somehow? I look at her and I notice her hair. It's so beautiful. It radiates impeccably bright rays of light, raining down my failing eyes, hurting me but also arousing me. I feel so attracted to her. I must have her. I don't know what's happening with me. I must go. I clench my teeth as I attempt to stand up. Tina does not help me, but then again, she doesn't hinder me either. That metallic taste returns. I feel something warm spreading throughout my mouth. Confused, not yet understanding what's going on, I touch my lips and they're wet. Wet with my own blood. This is true terror. I must continue writing this diary, for there is something that compels me. I tremble, teeth rubbing against each other. Soon enough, one of them gets loose and falls, tumbling, touching the others and breaking them to dust. What has become of me? I am so tired. I feel like I should sleep. 14th of October, 2019. It's Monday today. I have to go to work. But I just can't. I just vomited. It was all stomach acid. Blood and lymph and all my teeth, what's left of it. I cannot talk. My body feels incredibly weak and brittle, as if bones were made of paper and muscle is nothing but mud bleached and put together by marrow and glue. And the pain. It's far too strong to move or even think. As I'm writing this, I lose my fingernails one by one, leaving bloody traces on my laptop keyboard. Why am I even doing this? Why am I dying? Tina is here. She's put one of her gorgeous summer dresses on. Her legs. I don't remember them ever being this long and silky. My eyes can't help but be drawn to her curves, my heart pulsating with the very movement of the scarce fabric covering her silhouette. She sports high heels, making her tower above me, casting down a shadow of both insane beauty and deep hatred. Oh, I really want her. She sits next to me. My chest is shaking, the exaltation pressing piercing pain out of each and every inch of my skin. My dear Sam. She runs her hand through my hair. You know you mean the world to me, don't you? I trace the hundreds of hairs fluttering in the air, dancing their last tango with the draft at home. I feel the sharp coldness on my scalp, now bald and dry. However, I feel calm. I have my wonderful Tina with me. I am going to die a happy man. No, please, just let me live. Oh, sweetheart, you know that just won't do.
17th of October, 2019. I could not make a diary entry yesterday, the day before. All my fingers broke. I struggled to breathe. I think this is the end. But I am happy, for I have Tina here with me. She's getting more and more beautiful with each passing day. I so crave her. And I so hate her. It seems a demon lurks in that angelic body of hers. And she is wearing nothing but lingerie today. She tempts me. Her body is tanned and toned to cruel perfection. Her figure more feminine and exciting than any other woman who ever walked the world. I want her so much. If I could, the things I would do to her, but I can't. It hurts. Everything. I just wish I could sleep with her one last time. Before I fall asleep one last time. 19th of October, 2019. Please, if you read this, make sure you don't look at my beautiful Tina. She is all mine. I am all hers. Make sure you close your eyes and be swift when you kill her.
So, a couple of new ones there, and a few that I'd done before, but wasn't particularly happy with, and wanted to remaster, re-edit, well, whatever, just to give you a better experience of those stories. And, of course, well, who doesn't love a bit of a rainstorm in the background? Well, trying to keep very quiet and hushed here at the end, because some of you are probably asleep by now. I hope so. That's the whole intention of these videos, so the rainstorm sounds are mixed a bit higher in the mix than would normally be the case, just so that you can all relax and get off to sleep. Sorry if I've woken any of you with this. Well, you have a great night's sleep. Those of you who haven't still quite made it, very, very sweet dreams. Bye-bye, and I'll see you again very, very soon. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.